live stream. Today we're going to be talking about two different news stories that happened this past week because I want to talk about them. So if you have any thoughts on the stories, leave them in the comments down below. But let's get the two stories out first. I mean, we'll be chatting throughout the whole thing. Also, during the whole live stream today, if you want to help the channel out, if you want to continue the great work that we're doing here at Powered and Protected by Rainbows, you can definitely leave a super chat by hitting the $ in the chat and leaving a super chat there. Or you can support us over at patreon.com/MHPTV. We're trying to set up new ways for you to help the channel out if you want, or you can, like the best way that I always say to support the channel is to get some awesome merchandise, which we pinned in the comments as well, or check out the merchandise in the link below. So let's talk about these two news stories. The first of which is this situation involving Canon Hinnant. So if you're not aware, this is a pretty sad story that happened in America here. And I'm going to get to it just 1 second. So basically, this past week in North Carolina, this was a 5-year-old boy who was just days shy of starting kindergarten. He was apparently riding his bike outside of his home and out in the street in his front yard, basically. And someone came up to him and shot him point blank in the face and ended up killing him immediately. At that moment, they didn't know who did it because he ran away or some variation there. Really, this investigation is ongoing still. But what they do know is that the local police, along with the local media, started to cover this immediately in North Carolina. And right away, there was this manhunt that all the local neighbors, everyone around that area went. So, by the way, if you're wondering, the 5-year-old that we're talking about is the one in the thumbnail of this whole video. He's a white man, and yeah, it got dark fast. I'm sorry, but this is the story, right? And I promise there's a motive to this story. There's a good outcome to this story. But what happened was within 24 hours, the local media and the police decided to come together and promote a manhunt for this murderer. And right now, they're calling him a suspect because that's how the American justice system works, where you're proven innocent until proven guilty, or you're innocent until you're proven guilty. So basically, they did this manhunt for whoever killed him. It ended up where the suspect in this little 5-year-old boy's murder is this African American who lives next door to him. And they believe this to be the man who shot and killed this 5-year-old little boy. So, the local media covers this as they should. There's no one doubting how the local media should be covering this tragic event. And there's no one doubting that this is a tragic event. Like, no one in their right mind is going to call a 5-year-old boy murder good in any sense of the word, you know? It's tragic, no doubt about it. So, what ends up happening is within 24 hours, there's this manhunt for the killer. Within the same 24 hours, the same 24 hours of the murder, the person is caught who murdered this little 5-year-old. And though there's still an ongoing trial, which still has yet to happen, because murder trials take a long time. That's just how it happens in America. But he's caught. He's in jail. And the family the family of this 5-year-old has a lot of grieving to do, but at the very least, they have peace. They have justice being served. This little 5-year-old is going to have his day in court to where his murderer stands trial. And there are a list of things that can happen yet. Like, the murderer might get off scot-free because of a million different reasons. Like, for instance, if the police didn't read the Miranda rights to the suspect when they were arresting him, he can get off the whole charge if the police didn't do their jobs to the letter here, you know? There's reasons why in America really bad people have gotten off scot-free because the process isn't followed directly to the letter of the law, which is why you really hope that the police followed the letter of the law here, you know? And so that way this boy can have some justice, you know? But within 24 hours, this man was off the streets. And so after that point, all of a sudden, this story started blowing up on social media. And so people like me started to see it on Facebook and Twitter, all over the place. How come the national media, how come CNN, Fox, NBC, CBS, ABC, how come none of them were covering this 5-year-old's murder? How come none of them were talking about this on the news? And then you have media people like me, who not only am I the editor of a TV station, but, you know, I'm also working in the media for about 6-7 years now, you know? I've worked covering news for a long time. And so you have people in the media going, well, hold up a second. Because this boy's death was tragic, and the local media did their job in covering it. That is why you were hearing about it. If the local media didn't cover this at all, you would not hear a word about it. You wouldn't hear a word about any news story that ever happened in the history of the world. Media is how you hear about stories. That we've talked about before on the show. Like, the media is the fourth branch of the government. It's what checks and balances everything else, but also covers regular stories, you know? And so here's a situation where the local media did their job in covering a local story. Everyone admits that. So on a story like this, there's a certain radius of people who, yes, everyone should care about this story. Everyone should care that a 5-year-old boy was murdered. No doubt. Everyone should have the time to mourn this tragic event. But there's a certain radius from where this event happened in North Carolina where people are directly affected by it. Right? And so that's why local and regional news outlets cover these events, because only that certain radius is going to be directly affected by this news story. For instance, if there's a house fire or a car accident, only certain people in that radius are going to be directly affected by that story. Whereas if there's a house fire or a car accident in North Carolina, people in Southern California, yes, they might mourn the loss if someone died in those accidents, but are they going to be directly affected? No, that's not their story. They have house fires and car accidents in Southern California to worry about, you know? And so that's why regional news exists, to cover regional and local events. Just like, good stories that happen, like, a county fair happens. Well, regional news covers that regional event to be like, here's a county fair. But if a county fair happens here in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, do people in Southern California are they really affected by that county fair? Or do they have their own county fair? It's one of those situations where regional news covers regional things. Well, on the other side of that, they go, well, how come, mostly Republicans were starting to use this and saying, well, how come this 5-year-old's murder wasn't covered on national news, but yet here are all of these, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, how come all of them are covered by national news, and yet this little boy's murder isn't? And they started comparing it of like, well, it's this little boy, Hinnant, Hinnant, right? This little boy Cannon, he was murdered by an African American man. So it, quote, according to Republicans, quote, it doesn't fit the narrative that the media wants to cover, right? But here's the thing, Fox wasn't covering it either. And that's a far right-leaning media outlet that wants to show other things, So how come no one was really covering this other news story? And how come they cover George Floyd and Breonna Taylor? Well, there's a difference. While, yes, the killing of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and the hundreds of other African American people by police, all of them are technically regional stories too. And if they happened in a bubble, if George Floyd's murder happened in this little bubble, and it was the only event like it of its kind across America, it would be a regional story too. Regional news would cover it, and that would be it. There would be no more to the story. I mean, regional news would cover this thing happening, and they would cover the trial in court later on, but that would be the end to it. It would be a regional story because, again, everyone should mourn the loss, and yes, it's still a tragic event, but there's that radius of people that are directly affected. However, when you start hearing all these stories, like Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, all of them, hundreds upon hundreds of them here in America, when you start hearing all of these individual stories, you start realizing the radius of people who are directly affected starts to overlap with one another, because this is happening in every city in America. This is happening across the whole United States, where police brutality is going on. And that's not to say every policeman is bad, because they're not. Certainly a couple weeks ago when I had a case of someone committing a crime against me and doxing me, well, there was great policemen doing a great job helping me, but, and they looked after me for the next couple weeks here, and they're still looking after me. So I owe a great debt of gratitude to those policemen, and they're doing a great job. But you do have police that abuse their power, and it's not because they want to abuse their power. No, it's because that's how they're trained. And so what the national media does is it picks up on all these local stories. The national media knows about all these little tiny stories across the whole country. And they start to pick up on this pattern. And they're like, well, how come this same thing in the same way is happening across every major city in the entire country? How come this is happening all over the place, And the national media's job is to pick up on these patterns. And that's exactly what it did with police brutality and with Black Lives Matter movement. This is all national news because all of these cases are connected. And the national media started to undercover the fact that, well, police are trained how to shoot their gun before they're trained on how to keep their gun in their holster. Police are trained on how to step on someone's neck and choke them rather than subduing them in other ways that are less harmful. Police are trained on how to do this, right? And so, and there's actually seminars and video evidence out there of these seminars where police go to and they learn, well, the only thing that stops you from getting murdered from a man is your gun. Well, no, there's stun guns for a reason. There's other weapons you can use, you know? And many times in many of these cases, national media is uncovering the fact that, you know, police shot their gun because they thought there was a weapon, but turns out there was no weapon ever, you know? And so it's like police are trained to spot weapons that aren't really there. And so it's not individually any certain cop's fault, because as the national media is covering, it is a national epidemic of this happening, of this is how they are trained. And so that is the national story that they are following. Because this isn't just one regional case that only certain people are affected by. This is national, where these regions all overlap and we should all be affected by it, right? And thus, that is why national media is doing their job. Like, as a reporter, I can say, you know, yeah, national news is doing their job by covering Black Lives Matter. Regional news is doing their job by covering this 5-year-old boy's death. Yes, everyone is doing their job as they should, according to their job descriptions. And people say, well, you know, the national media should cover this 5-year-old boy's murder. Okay. That's your opinion, and you're entitled to that opinion. What you should do in that instance is give a news tip to the national media outlets. Call them. Write them a letter. Write them an email. Ask them. Cover this boy's death. Cover things like this in the future. That's what you should do. If you want national media to cover certain things in the future, and if you believe that is why, how did the kid die? Because, so basically he was riding his bike outside of his home, and his next door neighbor allegedly came up while he was riding his bike and shot him point blank in the head. It's pretty traumatic, and it's and it was also right in front of his 2 other siblings. So, all of that is still being investigated by the police, but the point is that his murderer was caught within 24 hours, you know, and his family will have justice, you know, whereas the death of the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, the murder of countless other African-American people across the country, they're not going to have justice because their murderers are still being paid, you know, because their murderers are people sworn to protect us. And that's what the national news story is. It's like, well, police who are sworn to protect us, they are trained on how to protect us, supposedly. They're the ones out there killing. Why did who die? Why did the little kid die? Because he was shot point blank in the head. But why did George Floyd die? Because the police, it was 4 or 5 policemen, one of which stepped on the back of his neck to subdue him and stop him from harming others, which wasn't happening, by the way. But he stepped on the back of his neck. What is the reasons for whose death? Who are you talking about, Molly? When you're shot with a gun in point blank in your face, that literally takes your brain and splattered. Like there's nothing left to live inside of your body. So it's pretty gruesome, but that's how being shot works. And so basically what happened to George Floyd, so yeah, what happened to George Floyd is he was stepped on the back of his neck, and he kept on trying to scream out, oh, there was no reason for the kid to die. The police are still investigating why this man decided to shoot this 5-year-old boy. No one really knows his motive to why he thought this 5-year-old boy should have to die. But here's the thing. Again and again and again, I'm going to say, guys, like, this 5-year-old was shot. There was, I don't care, like, what reasoning anyone had to shoot him. Like, there is no reason to shoot a 5-year-old. Like, how horrible of a 5-year-old must it be to have a reason to shoot them? He didn't do anything wrong in his life yet, you know? And so there is no reason to shoot a 5-year-old, you know? There's no reason to shoot anyone, regardless. But on the other side of that, George Floyd, there was no reason to kill him either. There was no reason to kill Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was sleeping in bed, and the police came in and killed her. Like, she wasn't doing anything wrong, you know? George Floyd was walking down the street. He was supposedly disrupting the common good, and the police subdued him and decided to step on his neck, so on the back of his neck. And in doing so, they were choking him. He couldn't breathe, and he kept on trying to scream out, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And that's why you see in America a lot of people are wearing shirts nowadays with, like, I can't breathe on it or something, or they're with protest signs, I can't breathe, because when someone's calling out, I can't breathe, usually that means don't keep choking them, you know? But the police in this instance kept choking him, knowing he would die. And so all of these instances happen where the police brutally murder African American people, and they're never really brought to justice. They're very rarely brought up on assault or murder cases, because according to them, oh, this person had a gun and it's self-defense, and that's completely fine. So it's like, I cannot believe, like, that police are able to get away with all this just because you have a badge on. First off, that means you should protect people more than you're trying to kill them, you know? And yet they're trained on how to kill first, you know? And so these people are wearing a badge and they're getting away with murder, like, just because of that badge, you know? And so that's why we have body cams in America now, where you have police who are mandated to wear body cams 24/7 while they're on the clock, and they are filmed the entire time. So that way, everything can be proved in court of, yes, that I fired my weapon for justified cause, right? So it's like, that's why we have body cams. But yet, body cam footage isn't always released to the media when a case like this is happening, because sometimes the police unions want to hide behind the fact that, or they want to get the story straight. So a lot of times in these cases, the 4 to 5 policemen that are involved, they are able to talk to one another or talk to the police union and get their story all in line before they talk to the media or before they talk to a district attorney. It's like, what? When you're on trial for murder as a regular person, you don't get to talk to your co-conspirators in that murder. You don't get to talk to anyone else. It is just, you talk to your lawyer and that is it, you know? And so you have police abusing their power and police unions protecting them. And so that is what the overabundance of problems we have here in America are right now. And on top of that, you have the Black Lives, and because of that, you have the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Where they're saying, you know, if you're gonna have police, which we agree you should have police, then let's defund them. Let's take some of the job response, and this is where the defund police comes from. Like, the Trump campaign wants to, make it sound like defunding the police is trying to take money away from the police. It is not trying to take money away from the police. It's a horribly worded title, but the movement means basically that the police right now have to deal with a lot of different scenarios. The police are called in to respond to animal control instances. They're called in to deal with counseling services. When you and your partner are having a big fight, the police are sometimes called by your neighbors instead of calling 911, and a counselor shows up to help you. There are plenty of ways that the police are called for things that they aren't trained on how to do. They shouldn't be required to handle these instances. If it gets out of hand, sure, the police should handle that. But at first, maybe a counselor should be called in the initial phase. Or maybe for animal control, you should call an animal specialist, not a policeman. They're not counselors. They're not animal control people. There are dozens of these things where police are called first to handle all of these situations. And so defund the police means basically funding other portions, funding counselors, funding animal control, funding all of these other programs, and taking some of the job responsibilities away from a policeman. And that way, maybe the police don't have to deal with everything all the time. Maybe they only have to deal with crimes, which is what they should be handling, Like, that's their job. It's not their job to handle animal control stuff. Animal control should handle that. So let's fund animal control so that they can handle animals and police can handle humans, So it's basically taking money and funding other programs, right? And so that is the whole debate of whether or not we should fund other programs, whether or not police should do all these different jobs, and the debate becomes, are police inherently racist because of their training? And so the national media is covering all of this because it's a national problem. This is happening in every city, every town, every neighborhood across America. This is how police are trained to handle all of these situations, but yet their job is not to handle all of the situations. Their job is to handle a small percentage of them. That's the police's job description, right? But yet they're required to do a whole lot more because we don't have enough government programs to handle it, right? And so that's what the national media is covering. All of these things happening all at once, right? The national media is covering the global pandemic, coronavirus, because that's a national issue. So the national media covers national things. Local media covers local things. That's how it should work. Don't like it? Call into your local station and ask them to cover something. Call into your national station and ask them to cover something. You as the viewer have a say in what they cover. But another story that the national media is covering right now, and by the way, like, this whole thing popped up on Facebook with Cannon's murder because the very racist people out there in America want you to think that, African American people aren't perfect. No, they're not perfect. Everyone knows that. They want to distract you from the racist police problem in America. So they're saying, well, no one's covering this story where a black man kills a white little 5-year-old boy. Like, yeah, people covered that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have heard about it either, you know? And so it's literally just this whole distraction movement. And it's using this 5-year. So there are millions of Americans right now using this 5-year-old boy's murder for their own political agenda. And that disgusts me to no end. How can you look at a 5-year-old, look at this story and go, let's not just cover the story as it happened like we did here at PBR, but let's use it for our political advantage and say that, the national media isn't covering this because it doesn't fit their narrative of racist police. No, because it had nothing to do with a policeman. No, because it's a regional story at best. We have, for instance, how come the national media didn't cover a robbery down the street? Because that wasn't a national story. And you have to start understanding, well, why are they pushing this narrative that, the media didn't cover this because it didn't fit their narrative? Because they're racist. Because they want to distract you from the millions of racist actions across America all the time by saying, well, what about this other thing? Well, here's the thing. It's a tactic called whataboutism, right? It's literally a word called whataboutism. And it's basically this tactic that goes, for instance, for this, right? For this instance, it's, well, there's millions of actions of racism across the whole nation all the time. But what about this one case over here, this one singular case? And it distracts millions of people who now look at that one case, right? It's like the rioters in America that are, there's peaceful protest all across America. And then there's people that go, well, what about all the looters? Well, first off, there's not that many looters who are breaking into buildings and looting them while the Black Lives Matter thing is going on. Black Lives Matter movement is a peaceful protest which, according to the U.S. Constitution, you are allowed to peacefully assemble and protest something. That is in our first ever amendment to the Constitution. No, actually, no, it's the first right in our Constitution is freedom to assemble, right? And so Black Lives Matter movement is a peaceful protest to peacefully say, don't kill us for being black, basically, And then you have this one singular case. Well, what about this other thing? Well, don't you understand? Both the murder of Cannon and the murders of all of these thousands of African American people by police brutality, both can be equally as wrong at the same time. And both can be equally tragic at the same time. One should not take away from the other. One should not outweigh the other. However, one of them is a systemic problem. One of them is a pattern of it happening across all of America, and the other is one singular case in one small town. That is the difference. Because if you solve this one murder of Cannon, of who murdered him, which has already happened, by the way, his murderer is already in jail, well, you've solved that one murder, but you haven't solved the thousands of African-American murders by police. You haven't solved that. And you haven't solved, in near Philadelphia, which is a couple hours away from where I live here in Pennsylvania. So in Philadelphia, there's, near there, a transgender black woman was murdered and dismembered and left in the Schuylkill River in June. So we have this problem where not just police are murdering African American people, but people are murdering LGBTQ people, and especially black LGBTQ people. And that was hardly covered by the national media, too, even though that's a systemic problem, too, just like Black Lives Matter movement. And so, also, sorry, getting back to my other point, with the Black Lives Matter movement, there are select people in the Black Lives Matter movement who are looting stores, who are burning down buildings, who are doing all these things that are illegal. Because all you're allowed to do in peaceful protest is peacefully protest. You're not allowed to break into stores. You're not allowed to burn things to the ground. That is all illegal actions. However, and here's a big point in that, the national media has covered the rioters, has covered these illegal actions, but they found a majority of the people that are looting, that are burning things to the ground, are not actually African American people. They're white. And so you have certain people that infiltrate the Black Lives Matter movement, pretending to be Black Lives Matter protesters who are peacefully protesting, and then they loot and they burn things to the ground because that's what they wanted to do, And so all of a sudden these small little actions by outcast of the movement are now blamed on the movement itself. And so now you have the president calling Black Lives Matter movement the Antifa movement, which is is a terrorism group, No, it's not a terrorism group. It's a peaceful protest. And so then you have, like, what haunts me about the Black Lives Matter movement is you had peaceful protest in Washington, D.C., which is good. That's where you should be protesting. That's where you should be peacefully assembling to, we love you too. Shush. Your explanation is top notch. Love this channel. We love you right back. So that's where you should assemble for national issues, because that, honestly, this problem of racism should be addressed by the national government. And I heard that most of the fires that are started in protest are started from police. That's unsubstantiated. God, I can't think of that word. So that hasn't been 100% proven by the media yet, and I want to leave that to the national media to cover it first. I haven't seen all of the coverage of all of that happening, so I want to leave that just because I don't personally know it to be a fact yet. I don't want to say that. And that's what this show is all about, is the facts directly. I don't want to be like, well, let's speculate on something, even though that might be completely true. I just have to research it on my own, and that's what I want to give time to. But but we do know for a fact that a majority of the fires that were started by white men and not African Americans at all, which is, that's a fact. But so you have a racist president that's living in Washington, D.C., saying that all these racist actions are justified and that the Black Lives Matter movement is a terrorism group. That's America for you right now. And all of the racists, because keep in mind, like it was a year or two ago when Nazis were, walking around in America, and Trump was saying, oh, there's blame on both sides. Well, no, it's not both sides. You have the opportunity to say that Nazis are bad. Why didn't you take that opportunity? Who wouldn't take that opportunity? Oh, yeah, a very racist man who doesn't care about the American people, right? Like last time I checked, we were fighting Nazis back in World War II and we won. Why are they still around? Why are they allowed to walk on American soil? I don't have any idea, But that was what was happening a year or two ago. And so that sort of fuels the fire of racism in America, where you have a racist president saying that these actions are okay and Black Lives Matter movement actions are not okay. Well, that fuels the fire of hatred in America towards everyone else, right? People now hate each other more than ever, right? And then in Washington, people peacefully assembled and said, this isn't okay. So then they put 2 other barriers around the White House because they were fearing for Trump's life. Let me just say it here. The White House is nicknamed the House of the People because it was built by slaves, and it's a house where the man who lives there, or the person who lives there, is elected by the American people, by the Electoral College, which is just another thing, right? It's the House of the People. And there's always this struggle by the Secret Service, which is a legitimate struggle, no matter who the president is, of wanting the American public to have access to their house. It is their house, the White House, not the president's house. The president just lives there temporarily. Hopefully. We never know with Trump, but it is the American public's house. And so Secret Service's job is to allow people to come into that house as much as they possibly can, but at the same time protect the president's life. And so there's always this struggle that goes on, no matter who the president is. But with this one, it's a system where they now put up extra barriers with barbed wire fencing outside to keep people out more and more and more. And at one point, you couldn't even see the White House through all the barriers. It's like, it's the people's house. How can you block people off from that? Why would you want to block people off from that? Then Trump, yes, he did say the coronavirus was a Chinese virus. That's racist, because it's not the Chinese virus. It's a virus that affected the world, you know? And we'll talk about that in just a second with the whole coronavirus thing and his response to it. But you have a racist president that's blocking off the American public more and more and more, and holding rallies in his own White House on these daily press conferences instead of holding press conferences for coronavirus, you know? So what did you expect, this man? Like, he's blocking off the American public. At one point, he even said, well, he even, like, did this whole photo shoot where he gassed hundreds of Black Lives Matter movement protesters in order to get to a church to take a photo, for a photo op, basically. And then he held a Bible in his hand, right? But he held the Bible upside down in the photo. Like, he gassed American people so that he can take a photo, and then he held the Bible upside down. That is what happened in America during the coronavirus response, during Black Lives Matter protest. Oh, right? So there's that story. And next we will talk about the coronavirus and voter suppression in America. So I'm going to turn my air on because it's really hot in here, and then I'll, one second. Sorry, it's just really, really hot. Unfortunately, that's only one of the stories that we're going to talk about today. There's a lot. All right. The next story is the coronavirus and voter suppression. So, Trump decided back in January not to tell the American public about the coronavirus at all. Even after the American public found out about it, he decided to tell people not to listen to... you're skipping ahead of me, shusha. But... whoever threw that tear gas, your mom's... whatever. Even when he started talking about the coronavirus, he told people not to listen to the CDC. Don't ever listen to those people at CDC. They can't be trusted. It's the CDC. They have no stake in the game of any political issue ever. It's just a matter of keeping people alive. That's their sole job. They're a bunch of doctors who took their Hippocratic oath to keep people alive. That is their sole job. They can care less about who's president. They can care less about who's in office. You know, why are you not listening to the CDC? CDC said, wear a mask, wash your hands, do all these things. And then you have Trump going, you don't need to wash your hands. You don't need to just go. Why are you trying to shut down sporting events? Why are you trying to shut down all these, these rallies for my rallies? Why are you trying to do all this? Like, he kept on saying over and over again to his voters, don't worry about the coronavirus. You'll be fine. Oh, my God. And so, you know, a couple months later, we have 157,000 people dead in America. And that's the highest number of any country. We are now, like, we started off as a country that had to worry about the coronavirus and had hardly any cases. If the president and if the CDC all worked together and told the American public, everyone has to quarantine for 14 days. So, well, here's a little tidbit, right? And one of my friends did an interview with Dr. Rachel Levine, who is the Secretary of Health in Pennsylvania. And another of my friends has had an interview with Dr. Fauci, like, like, who is the head of the CDC, you know? The actual freaking head of the CDC, you know? And they all pretty much agree. All these doctors, all of these secretaries of health, all these doctors all agree that if in the very beginning of this, where we only had 1 or 2 cases in America, if we all quarantined for 14 days, if we all wore our mask for 14 days, America would have saved 157,000 deaths. Keep that in mind. Every death in America, besides those first maybe handful of people, would have been prevented if the president, the CDC, and every single state's Secretary of Health and Department of Health were all on the same page. If we had one clear message in America of keeping people safe over politics, over money, over any other cost, we would have prevented 157,000 deaths. Those are facts. And that is something that, you know, my friends who interviewed those people have all come back from that interview with answers of. Everyone agrees we would have prevented all of those deaths. But instead, you had a president and you had governors who were saying, no, it's perfectly safe. Go out there, keep partying, keep going together, keep these mass things happening. And then you have other states like Pennsylvania where the governor, Tom Wolf, decided he's going to take this seriously and he's going to shut everything down right away. And, oh, your great-granddad died because of coronavirus because Britain didn't protect care homes. Oh, my God. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry to hear that. But that's the thing. I mean, like, there were so many people that could have been prevented from dying. And they weren't because we didn't have one concise message, you know? In Pennsylvania, there was a thing where Governor Tom Wolf and Secretary of Health came together and they said, let's shut everything down. Let's be an example. Let's flatten the curve. The curve is basically the healthcare industry. It can only handle so many people at once in a hospital. And so the curve is basically, in the very beginning of coronavirus, we were afraid too many people would have to go to the hospital all at once and it would be too much for any hospital combined in America to handle, right? And so flattening the curve meant, well, you're going to hopefully quarantine and keep the cases at a maximum amount at any given time, and that way the curve sort of flattens, and that way the hospitals are never overrun with cases, right? They might have to handle the same number of cases over the course of time, but they're going to handle them at a lot lower rate all at once. And so they can handle all these people at one time rather than all at once in the very beginning and then everyone's dead, because not enough hospital beds were available, right? So in America, we didn't have that clear message. We had the president saying that Governor Wolf was horrible for shutting everything down. How dare he, all these other things. And now that we're a couple months in, you have secretaries of health across the whole country who are now using Pennsylvania as an example. Because Dr. Rachel Levine, she did such an amazing job with this, right? But you had people during her policies here making fun of her because she is transgender. She's the highest transgender official in state office right now. But she was voted in unanimously by unanimously. Think about how hard it is to be voted in unanimously by any government, right? The state House of Representatives and Senate all voted for her unanimously. There was not one Republican or Democrat who voted against this woman being Secretary of Health to handle pandemics just like this, right? And so all of a sudden, now that the pandemic started, well, she's transgender. She can't handle the coronavirus. No, you voted for her. She can handle it, right? And she did. And now her work is now being used as an example across the whole country of how we should do things correctly. That we should shut everything down. That we should handle this coronavirus with the seriousness that it demands, right? And now Trump's like, how dare Governor Tom Wolf not want to do, how dare he want to keep everything shut down for longer? It's safe to do that. Until it is safe, until there is a vaccine, until there is progress being made on this, we need to shut everything down. And here's the thing, here's the other side of it. Still, to this day, if everyone was to quarantine for 14 days straight, you wouldn't have many, if at all, new cases of coronavirus. It would play out. But because we still have people who are like anti-maskers, because we still have people that are like, I don't believe coronavirus is real, it's all a political tool. Well, I mean, all you need to do is watch our episode on coronavirus and you'll understand it's real, because 157,000 people died, so far. And that number's only growing by the day. And then you have the president going on air on HBO the other day, and he's asked about, I think it's 1,000 new people every week die because of the coronavirus in America. And the president was asked about that, and he goes, it is what it is. Wait, what? It is what it is that thousands of people are dying. It is what it is that 157,000 people die. It is what it is. Well, maybe we should have had a president who actually knows how to lead and actually knows how to tell people, wear a mask, quarantine, be safe. Safety over profit, safety over every other thing, right? Well, the reason I say all that is to talk about this next issue. It is still not safe in America or any other country to gather in mass groups. It is still not safe to do that. It is still not safe to go out and touch the same things that everyone else is touching, including voting machines. So, here in America, we have our election coming up on November 3rd, 2020, for President of the United States, and a list of other things, right, that are up for election this term. And that is the National Voter Day, or National Election Day here in America. And so we have this election day coming up, and America is trying to figure out, how do we do this national election safely? Because we can't postpone it. The Congress is saying it's up to them to postpone an election if they wanted to, but they don't feel it's right to do that because Trump needs to get out of office now. We need to have an election. It needs to happen, And so we can't really postpone it. But how do we do it safely? Because when you go to an election place here in America, you go to your local firehouse or wherever, right? And you have a touch screen in front of you, and it says, like, who do you want to vote for? And you touch certain buttons, right? And you say, this is who I want to vote for. And then you hand that a credit card, basically. It records your vote on a credit card that is just for the voting system. And you hand that card to your election office person, and they record your ballot, right? It's all anonymous, but at the same time, you have to touch the screen that everyone else is touching. You have to touch these cards that everyone else is touching. So it's a huge concern for Department of Health and CDC, because you're touching these products that coronavirus can live on for days. And you're touching them mere seconds after someone else is touching them. And so now you have this system where people are going to be forced to touch things that other people are touching with coronavirus. That is not safe at all. And also, on top of that, for years now, local news outlets have been covering these election machines being able to be tampered with. Because what you don't know is, before the November 3rd election, for about a week prior to it, the election offices of different counties go around and deliver these machines to wherever your polling place is going to be. They deliver these things to the school districts, firehouses, wherever your polling place for your area is. They deliver these machines up to a week in advance because they have so many of these things to deliver, right? Completely understandable. What the election office doesn't want you to know, and what the local news outlets across the country have been covering for years now, is these election machines are stored in the hallways of school buildings. They're stored in, like, these firehouses that have access to people all the time. And so it's so easy to tamper with them. And so one local news outlet decided to try to hack an actual election ballot machine here in America. They took one of these cards that is normally used to record your ballot, right? The same kind of thing they took, and they installed a virus in it, which that virus was harmless in this instance, but they proved it would be very easy to load a virus on this card that anyone could that would only record certain parties' votes, right? And so they proved that you can load a virus onto this card and very easily go into any of these polling places a week prior to the election. All you need to do is put the card in for mere seconds into these machines without someone noticing it's happening, and boom, that machine is now tainted, and it only records votes for certain parties. Every vote that is cast for any candidate, it records it as a vote for a certain candidate that's chosen by the virus that's installed in the computer. So they proved how easy it was to hack these machines, because they're all electronic, and they're left unattended in polling places across America. This local news station proved how easy it was to hack and rig an entire election nationally if you had one person go from polling place to polling place all day long. They proved how easy it was. And so these machines really can't be trusted 100%, right? But every major study that was done on these machines has proven, hey, it's not as bad as what we think, and no one ever tried that yet. Keep in mind, no one ever tried that yet. So, but if you're a country that has the resources to do that kind of thing, trying to hack someone else's election, hey, completely possible, right? So, with that in mind, and also the fact that it's coronavirus, it's not safe to vote in person, election offices are now encouraging people to register to vote by mail. Because while a majority of America goes in person to their local polling place and votes every single term, well, there's a lot of people that also register to vote by mail because either they're old and they can't make it to an election polling place on election day. Maybe they'll be on vacation and they won't be near their local polling place to register their vote, so they know they'll be absent. Maybe they're in the military and they're overseas and they won't be, again, near their local polling place to register their vote. There's a list of reasons why people can register their vote ahead of time on what's called an absentee ballot. So basically what happens is you call your local election office and you ask your county's election office and you ask them, can I have an absentee ballot for my address? And you need to register this, and you might have to send them a form, and they send you an absentee ballot in return, right? So you ask them, hey, can I have one of these absentee ballots? They mail you one. You fill it out, right? Now, you can't change it once you fill it out, but you fill it out with all of the information of who you're voting for, right? And you send it back to them, right? So it's a pretty easy system that you can vote by mail, right? And anyone can do it across the whole United States. So what's wrong with this system? Well, it's a system that's been around since the Civil War. Literally. This system has been around since the Civil War. And national organizations have done research on absentee ballots. They've researched absentee ballots ever since the Civil War when it began. And they've only ever found 13 individual cases of voter fraud. 13 out of hundreds of millions of absentee ballots cast in America. Now, here's the thing about that. That's still really bad, right? Right, Matt? There's absolutely nothing beyond that 13 number, right? No, obviously not. I wouldn't be totally leading to some other point here, right? Well, what happened in a majority of the cases that they found of voter fraud, it was someone who cast their absentee ballot on a certain day before the election, because typically absentee ballots are due about 7 to 14 days before the actual election, and that way there's the votes are actually in on time, right? Now, what you should also keep in mind, side note here, is that if an election is not close, if you're running for president and the other candidate has 1 million more votes than you, and the total number of absentee ballots in all of America is only 250,000 or something, right? Well, they're not going to even count those 250,000 absentee ballots, because even if every single person who voted on an absentee ballot voted for you, it's still not going to make a difference in that election. The other person's still going to win, right? So that's, typically speaking, they don't count absentee ballots for big ticket items, because there's not enough absentee ballots in total to make a difference in an election, right? This time there will be, because what is it? I think 70% of America are now considering voting by mail, right? If not more. So it will actually make a difference this time. And so they're trying to figure out how they're going to count this number of votes in this amount of time. So they're saying to people, give us at least 7 to 14 days your vote in advance. That way we can start counting them in advance. That way, November 3rd, we might actually have an answer. You know, we might actually know who is going to be president, right? So typically speaking, you need to have your ballot in a couple days prior to an election. You want to have it to your election office a couple days prior, right? But they've only ever found 13 cases of a voter fraud. Well, what ended up happening in a majority of those cases was, and keep in mind, this is over the course of since the Civil War to now that they found these 13 individual cases, which, by the way, it would not have made a difference in any certain election ever, right? Because there are 13 cases across America. None of them were anywhere near each other in America, and none of them were in the same year as each other in America. So they wouldn't have made any difference at all in any election ever. But, so fine. Even if you want to call them voter fraud, they wouldn't have made a difference anyway. So if someone goes to this much trouble, right, to commit voter fraud and is risking federal crimes to do so, they're only risking it for one vote at most, which is not going to make a difference in any election. So congratulations, people, you know, like, whatever. But a majority of these cases weren't actually voter fraud at all. They're considered it, but they're not actually voter fraud. So what ended up happening in these cases was people did an absentee ballot, like an older person would do an absentee ballot, mail it in to the local election office to record their vote, and it just so happened that they passed away between when they mailed out this vote and when the November election actually occurred. So they died in that interim period, and for that reason, and for that reason alone, they were technically dead on election day. And so it's voter fraud that someone, a dead person, is voting. Yeah, but they were alive when they cast their ballot a week ago. You know? Like, so those are the cases that you hear about when you hear Fox News and Republicans saying, voter fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud. It's literally people who died between when they cast their vote and when the election happened. That's what happened. That is what happened. So it's not voter fraud. You're making stuff up out of thin air just to prove your point, right? And here's the thing. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm independent. I can care less who wins any election as long as they're LGBTQ friendly, right? But you can't make shit up just to force your narrative down people's throats either, you know? Like, that's not something you can do. That's called slander. When you're saying false narratives, right? Well, actually, no, slander is when you're making false things up about your opponent, but directly. But so that is what all of these major organizations found with voter fraud over the course of history in absentee ballots. Keep that in mind for this next part. Now, this year, because of coronavirus, no one really wants to vote in person in the election booth in the polling stations this year, except for very far-leaning right Republicans who all believe in Donald Trump, and because Donald Trump keeps saying, it's safe to go out to your polling place. Coronavirus isn't going to kill you, all this sort of stuff, right? So you have Republican voters who are still going to go to the polls, who are still going to, who are still going to vote in person. So great. Trump knows that his voters are going to go to the polls in person. He knows that a majority of Democrats are going to try to vote by mail. So, let me just ask you this. If you found out your opponent in any race was doing things a certain way and your voters were doing things another way, would you try to sabotage your opponent's way of getting votes? Or would you want a majority of America to actually go out there and vote? Sorry, thirsty. So, here in America, here's the next little fun part. And this is called voter suppression. It's so fun to talk about this, right? Who is better than the Cheeto? Anyone. God. Anyone's better than the Cheeto. here in America, Donald Trump doesn't believe that voting by mail is valid because he was told this rhetoric of it's so dangerous and voter fraud happens all the time. He's told that because he wants to believe it. Because Democrats are the ones trying to use vote by mail this year to be safe. Yeah, I know. Haven't even explained it yet, and I'm depressed. So, yeah. So Donald Trump and the very far right-leaning Republicans all believe that we're maybe we'll talk about some other stuff, but I'm not sure yet what yet. So Donald Trump and the far right-leaning Republicans all have this thought that mass voter fraud is going to happen in America if we do vote by mail. They even, in fact, said that the 2016 election was hacked and millions of illegal votes were cast for Hillary Clinton. But here's the thing. He still won that election because of the Electoral College. So you're saying, millions of votes were cast fraudulently for your opponent. But doesn't that mean that voter fraud could have happened to you too? And again, there's no evidence of any voter fraud happening in 2016 at all. So he's protesting that election still. He's saying Hillary Clinton rigged the election. No, she didn't. But you know who did rig the election? You know who did collude with Russia during the 2016 election? Donald Trump. Huh. So the guy accusing people of everyone else doing voter fraud is the one that colluded with Russia to win the election. It's sort of like that situation where whoever smelt it, dealt it, right? Of like, if you fart, it's pretty much, if you fart in a big group, you're like, oh, Jimmy, how come you farted? Oh, God, I can smell that from here. Typically, the first person to bring up that someone farted is the one who actually farted, and they're just trying to blame it on someone else, right? It's sort of like that situation of like, how dare Hillary Clinton collude and cheat this election? No, he was the one that cheated in the election, right? So that's what the FBI found. Well, actually, after a year-long investigation and millions of dollars put into this, there was no evidence that he didn't collude with Russia, but the head investigator's like, I can't prove that he did either because not enough people came forward, but also you can see the evidence for yourself. And the evidence is like, all of his top advisors and him met with Russia officials, and then Russia was hacking into Facebook and sponsoring things on Facebook to only support Donald Trump. Like, there is collusion that is happening between Russia and Donald Trump right now. And Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are like best friends. It's like, wait, Vladimir Putin's a dictator, and like, back in the Cold War, we were horrible enemies with Russia. Why are we trying to be friends with him now? I don't understand this. Why is Donald Trump best friends with only dictators? He's not friends with presidents. He's not friends with, what is it for parliaments and stuff? Presidents and, you can let me know in the comments here, but, of like, Great Britain has not a president, but there's another word for it. But anyway, he's only friends with dictators because he's friends with Kim Jong-un, and he's friends with he's friends with like Russia. And it's like, we shouldn't be friends with fucking dictators. I don't understand this, right? Prime ministers, thank you so much. I could not think of that word. So, yeah, and that's the thing. He was impeached for colluding with Russia. He was impeached. No, sorry, not with Russia specifically. He asked Ukraine on a phone call to help him take down Joe Biden. He did quid pro quo with Ukraine and said, hey, if you help me win against my opponent, Joe Biden, in this election, then we will give you millions of dollars in, we will give you millions of dollars of aid and we'll give you millions of dollars of weapons. It was, you give me something to help my opponent, help win against my opponent, and I'll give you this in return. I will give you American taxpayer resources if you help me win against my opponent. That is illegal. That is called quid pro quo, and it's collusion, right? So he was impeached for doing that, right? And he even admitted that he did it. And while he was admitting it, he's like, I don't understand what's so wrong about this. Well, maybe if you read a federal law every once in a while, you know. So he's like, I don't understand what's so wrong about it. Like, I asked China the same thing. What? You're on trial for impeachment for doing this, and you're like, I don't understand what's wrong. I did it to another country too. Oh my God. How fucking stupid do you have to be, So he's admitting on camera that he did these illegal things, right? And so the House votes to impeach him. He is impeached. He will forever be an impeached president. The Senate gets that trial, and Mitch McConnell won't have it because Mitch McConnell is kissing Trump's ass. He won't take this impeachment to vote, and they're like, no, we're not going to, because it's Republican controlled, and because, keep in mind, Republicans should do what is right here. But because so many Republicans rely on Trump's voters, if Trump comes out and says anything wrong about them, suddenly they're not going to win their next election cycle for being in the Senate. And so you have people fearing Trump so much that they're willing to sacrifice any morals they have. And so now they voted to not officially prison Trump for his crimes. And so no matter what comes up here, you know that he might be impeached by the House, but he's not going to be impeached by the Senate, which the Senate is the one that actually can convict him and send him to jail. So, and I know it's a little confusing, I'm sorry. But that is what's happening. He can basically get away with any crime because he controls the Senate. He can be impeached all the House wants, but the Senate won't actually convict him. The Senate won't actually send him to jail, which is the thing that will stop him from doing these kind of things. So, what's happening right now in America? Well, while Trump is spouting this rhetoric that voter fraud is happening and that no matter what happens in the election, he's going to protest the election results. So already, even if Trump wins or loses, you have Republican voters who are going to protest the election results. There's already going to be a protest if Trump loses. If Trump loses, there's already an excuse as to why he lost, because voter fraud, right? It's not going to be, no, it was a fair election like every other election in history since the Civil War, because of vote by mail has been perfected over the years, and only 13 individual cases, and those 13 cases are people who died, legitimately died before the election and just cast their vote beforehand. Like, it's not going to be, oh, it was a fair election, it's perfectly fine. It's going to be, Trump lost, how dare they, and there's going to be riots in the street. There's going to be buildings burned to the ground, if Trump loses. If Trump wins, there's still going to be people who go, well, this all happened, It's so exhausting to follow politics, but at the same time, you have to sort of follow politics in order to understand what's happening in your own country and go, this is wrong, or this is right. This is what I believe in, this is what I don't, So, Trump this week, who, like I said, doesn't believe vote by mail is going to work. He thinks it's all going to be fraudulent, even though there's no evidence of that ever. So Trump goes on Fox News earlier this week, because according to the House Democrats, in what's called the HEROES Act, it's another House of Representatives bill that they put forward that would help the American public through the coronavirus pandemic. And in there, they asked for a couple, 3.2, I think, billion dollars in aid for the Postal Service, because the Postal Service is a United States service that is required by the Constitution that we provide to our people in order to deliver medications, in order to deliver mail to everyone to get their bills. Because here's the thing. The IRS and all these government programs need a way to get mail to the American people, need a way to formally give people notice of, hey, your taxes are due, or here's this form you needed to fill out, The mail, United States Postal Service is a required thing by the Constitution here in America, that we have to provide this service to everyone, And it's a service, so it's not meant to make a profit. For a long time there, it was making a small profit. It was able to keep afloat. Now, keep in mind, years and years ago, they started pension programs, where basically if you worked for the Postal Service as a mailman, walking around a town delivering mail every single day, 6 days a week, if you did that for a number of years, you got what's called a pension, which is basically you can retire, and after you retire, you're given a certain amount of salary every year, and you don't have to work anymore. A pension is basically a retirement fund of, like, after a certain amount of, you give us a certain amount of time of your life, and we will give you a salary for the rest of your life, and you don't have to work for it after those certain number of years, So they promise pensions to their workers, to all these Postal Service workers, and there's Postal Service unions that fought for this, right? So ever since then, the Postal Service has had millions and millions of dollars of bills to pay these pensions out. But it's a good thing to have pensions, because these people who are working 6 days a week delivering mail, I think they deserve a retirement eventually, I think they eventually deserve to go home and go, like, you know what, I can enjoy the rest of my life now. I worked my ass off for how many years, and now it's time to enjoy that money that I made, I don't think it should be required of any of us to work until the day we die and have to, just keep working because we can't afford to retire, And so this is something that was great that was done with the Postal Service. Now, because of those contracts of the pension, the Postal Service has to pay those pensions before they pay any different bill. So the Postal Service has to pay all the people that are retired for their pensions, according to these contracts, before they go out and buy new machines, before they go out and they pay the salaries of any current workers that are working in their post offices right now. So let's say, for instance, all of a sudden the Postal Service lost a whole bunch of money or a whole bunch of funding from the federal government. Let's say, for instance, that happened. Contractually, they have to pay the pensions first and foremost. Contractually. If they don't do that, they're on the hook for billions of dollars more in all of these legal fees, right? So if they don't pay that first, they're going to be paying even more than that in the long run. So they have to pay that first. Second, they have to worry about their own workers. But because it's second, let's say they don't have enough funding to pay for everything. The federal government doesn't give them the funding to do everything, right? So the first thing they're going to cut are the postal workers working right now. That's the first thing they're going to get rid of, because there's no contract to say that every post office person that's working right now has to work 6 days a week. There's no contract to say that. So you can lay off your workers that are working right now and be completely legal in how you do it. You cannot stop paying the pensions, which are first and foremost on your budgets, right? And so just keep that in mind of, like, you first have to pay the pensions, you secondly have to pay the people that work for you right now, and third is like any new machinery that you would have to buy, right? And sometimes you can buy machinery that replaces someone else's, that like one piece of machinery or a robot replaces 5 persons' jobs. You know, sometimes you can do that, and so sometimes it helps you to pay the machines first, or second there out of the list, So, okay, that is how the Postal Service financials go. Well, see, this past week, Donald Trump went on Fox News, which is a Republican, very far-leaning Republican news network here in America. Donald Trump went on to Fox News and said on Fox News that he was going to be defunding the Postal Service. He was going to be taking money away from the Postal Service for the U.S. election in November. Because he doesn't trust vote by mail. Right? So, remember how I said that process a moment ago? Of what would happen if all of a sudden the Postal Service wasn't funded nearly as much? Well, that's what's happening here in America. So, the Postal Service is now getting less money from the federal government. They, first and foremost, contractually and legally, they have to pay the peaceful protests turned violent because of other people, not the Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter movement was not violent at all, or very, very little. For the most part, it's a very peaceful protest. It was people that were trying to overthrow the Black Lives Matter movement that infiltrated and tried to say they were. Anyway, online voting would be a great idea if we can have that. But here's the thing. So the Postal Service is now getting funded even less from the federal government because Donald Trump doesn't want them to be funded. So they first and foremost contractually and legally have to pay their pension workers. Secondly, they have to worry about their workers now. But because they're not getting as much funding, they have to lay off some postal workers. Now, where are they going to lay off postal workers at? Well, probably they're not going to lay off that one postal worker that works in the country out there that services all these different homes for the whole town. But typically that's Republican area. So Republican votes are going to get cast, and they're going to get through. Where they're going to lay off people first is the big cities where Democratic voters typically vote in. And because cities have hundreds, if not thousands, of postal workers compared to the very few and far between in the country area, the countryside. Because there's less homes in the country to service compared to the city where there's a lot of different apartments, a lot of different places, right? So you're going to have people laid off in the big cities for postal workers, where Democratic votes are being cast. And Trump knows this. His campaign knows this. So, okay, not only that, but the second part of this is that in key Democratic areas, mail sorting machines are being removed from post offices. Now, if you're not aware, because I have friends who work in the postal offices, right? In every post office in America, there's a machine in the back that helps them massively. Years ago, they didn't have these, but nowadays they have these machines. Basically, every single morning, right, there's a box truck or a tractor trailer that shows up to their door and delivers a whole truckload of mail for the whole town that has to go out to the whole town that day, right? And in each post office, there's a machine that basically you dump a whole box of mail into this machine, and it sorts it into individual boxes, tiny little boxes, for mailmen to go through, right? So basically, this machine knows that I, as a postal worker, I serve this street, and this street, and that's my job for the day, is to deliver mail to these certain streets, right? And so that machine knows that information, and it goes, any mail going to these certain streets has to go in my box to be delivered by me today. Any mail that is goes to my coworkers' streets, it goes in their box. So these sorting machines go in every single post office in the whole country, because it allows you to take a whole truck of mail and sort it within a matter of minutes, not a matter of days like it used to, right? And so mail comes in on a truck every morning, and it's sorted through these machines. That this post office worker gets this box because that's all of the mail for that address, for the addresses that he or she does, and here's a box for this other postal worker, right? Well, that machine allows post office workers to do their job a million times faster than ever before. It's a great machine, honestly. So these machines are being dismantled and removed from key Democratic areas across the country. There's photographic evidence of this. Someone is ordering that to happen. Someone is telling them to dismantle these machines at certain places and not other places. And by the way, like, my friends in the post office industry, like, they go, yeah, normally these machines are serviced, but they're serviced in place, so it stays there and upgrades are done to it. And for that day, typically what happens is if a service needs to be done to one of these machines, they'll allow the mail to go through the system that morning, and then they service the machine during the day while the post office workers are out there delivering mail during the day. And that way they're not really interrupting the whole process, you know? But they're not completely dismantled and taken out of post offices entirely. They still have the machine there, typically, when they're being serviced. Or at the very least, a new one is installed while that one is going away and being serviced, because the post office, as a national group, they have extra ones for this instance, where if a machine really malfunctions, they can bring a new one to them and install it, and it's up and running the very next day. But that's not happening here. The machine is just being taken out, and there's no new one coming in, right? And so it's not service work, it's just someone wants the post office to work a whole lot slower in key Democratic areas. Why? Think about who benefits from that, right? Also remember the fact that Trump's wife was supposed to do a press conference on if she came to the U.S. legally. That was 3 years ago. Yeah. It's funny. So, who benefits from this? Well, Trump does, you know? And Trump just happens to be the one in control of the post office right now. Ain't that a coincidence, you know? Now, there are reports out there that after Trump made that comment that he's going to defund the post office workers, and he's going to take a whole lot of funding away from the U.S. Postal Service, after that comment was made on Fox News, the NPR, which is National Public Radio, did an interview with Trump that same day, later on, and asked him, are you really going to take funding away from the Postal Service? Because keep in mind, it's not just about voting. It's the U.S. Postal Service delivers medication to people. It delivers IRS forms to people. It delivers everything to people. Like, yes, you have competition at U.S. Or UPS and FedEx in America here, but for the most part, U.S. Postal Service is the service that goes to a lot more homes. UPS and FedEx don't service a lot of homes in the United States because they're too rural of areas for them to service. So United States Postal Service allows a way to get mail to them, right? And so NPR asks, are you really going to defund them? Are you really going to take funding away from this service that is constitutionally given to every single citizen, right? And he goes, no, what you don't understand is I will gladly fund United States Postal Service, but I don't want to fund voter fraud. Well, voter fraud isn't happening. So you can vote. You can give Postal Service as much money as you want. That they're not going to do voter fraud, you know? but Republicans think they are. Republicans make up their own evidence on this. So it's so messed up. It's like, oh, Trump never said that, but there's evidence of him saying it. He's on Fox News, your network, saying it. Like, what the fuck is happening in America? Oh, wait. Because there's more to this story. Why does Trump want to defund United States Postal Service beyond the fact that right now it's needed for, like, Trump is hiding. Well, here's a much better way to explain it, right? So right now, funding is being taken away from the United States Postal Service at a time we need more funding for the United States Postal Service than ever before. That's regardless of what's happening with the election. That's regardless of what's happening with the pandemic. The United States Postal Service was losing money for a number of years because of the pension program, which was set up to be a great thing, and I believe it to be a great thing. But because of that, it does lose money. It's a service. That's what services do. They're not there to make money. They're there to help the American public, you know? It's just like, you know, your local town park. It's not there to make money. It's there to be a service to the people, you know? Like a school district, right? It's not there to make money, but it's there to educate the American children. So it's not a profitable venture, and Trump doesn't understand this, you know? But yeah, the fact that conversion therapy is still a thing baffles me too. But Trump is, like, he's defunding the Postal Service, and he's taking key machines out of Democratic areas to sort through mail faster, to allow votes to go through faster. What that is called is voter suppression. It is a federal crime. It is not the first federal crime that Trump committed, but it is a federal crime. So what voter suppression is, and maybe it's just easier if I get the actual definition of it rather than my own definition of it. But voter suppression, by definition, is a strategy used to influence the outcome of an election by discouraging or preventing specific groups of people from voting. That is the definition of it, right? So here in America, when you know a majority of your voters are going to vote in person regardless of safety concerns, and you know a majority of your opponent's voters are going to vote by mail, and you try to take away their ability to vote by mail by slowing down the post office, by defunding them so they can't do their jobs, so they won't have enough workers to do their jobs. When you take machines out of key Democratic areas to allow them to do their jobs faster, all of that slows down the process of Democratic votes getting to the actual election and actually being cast. When you do that, you're discouraging Democratic voters while encouraging Republican voters. That is voter suppression, by definition. Right? Should Trump go to jail? He is, at this point, Trump has committed hundreds upon hundreds of federal crimes, and he's gotten away with most of them. So he should go to jail for life. His whole family should go to jail. But the Senate will never convict him because they're Republican controlled right now. Well, because of this accusation that Trump is committing voter suppression, Trump is now hiding behind Amazon. You literally cannot make this shit up, right? Like, how in the freaking world does Amazon have anything to do with voter suppression? Right? Here's how. Well, Trump says that, and the Trump administration says, that Amazon uses United States Postal Service to deliver their packages, which they do. Amazon has a contract with the United States Postal Service to help them deliver packages to more people across America. Okay. So a company gives millions, if not billions of dollars to a delivery service to help deliver their packages to their customers. Oh, wait, so you mean like my business has a contract with the United States Postal Service to deliver packages for me? Oh, so you mean like most small businesses that do online business? Like a majority of small businesses have contracts or pay the Postal Service to deliver packages to their online customers. That is what happens. Amazon is an online company. What did you expect them to do? You know? Like, yeah, they're trying to come up with their own delivery service for major cities, but still, they need help from United States Postal Service to deliver to small towns. How dare a multi-billion-dollar company have a contract with the Postal Service? How dare they, pay for packages to be delivered and give millions, if not billions, of dollars to a service? You know, how dare they do that? How dare they support an American service provider? You know, it's just funny to me. Like, there's a lot to complain about with Amazon, with their tactics of how they'll bring your company in and they'll sell your products for you, and then all of a sudden they see that your products are doing pretty well. Oh, great. And they'll even sponsor your products. They'll help you get your products out to more people. Great. And all of a sudden, after they start seeing, well, this product is doing really well, you know, Amazon buys all the materials to make that product themselves. They make it themselves. They sell it on their platform. They put your company down the list way, way far, and theirs is all of a sudden the top result in that area, in that marketplace. And all of a sudden, and they'll sell their product for lots less than they sell yours is priced, right? And so basically they've been proven to do this at this point. They will lose billions of dollars selling product for less than what it costs them to make that product, just so they can push down smaller businesses. And then as soon as that smaller business goes out of business because they can't afford to work anymore, all of a sudden they'll spike their prices. It's all about market share to Amazon. Amazon will lose billions of dollars to gain market share in the long run because they're after the end goal. They're after that 10-year business. They're not after business today, you know? And so if they gain market share and they get rid of your company, well, so be it. And that's why I have products on Amazon, but I sort of refuse to put all my products on Amazon because they do this to people all the time. They're notorious for this. There's a lot to say about Amazon, but them supporting the United States Postal Service is not one of them. That's not something to complain about, you know? That's great that they do it. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. At least they're paying some sort of service, you know? I mean, last year, Amazon made $11 billion in net profit, and they paid $0 in federal taxes. Do you know how fucked up that is? That's something to complain about, not the fact that they're giving millions of dollars to the Postal Service to deliver packages, right? So, Trump is saying, well, because Trump has a long-standing feud with Amazon, and he doesn't like Jeff Bezos, because Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, is the richest man on earth at this point. He's on his way to becoming the world's first trillionaire. Imagine having $1 trillion to just do anything you want with, right? But Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, which is a paper that routinely covers Trump and routinely is not favorable to Trump, because they report on actual facts and news, not fake news and not made up stuff that Trump wants them to report. They're not 100% Trump supporters, and so Donald Trump doesn't like them. Donald Trump calls them fake news because they report on actual facts, right? So Donald Trump does not like the Washington Post. And because Jeff Bezos bought up the Washington Post, he doesn't like Jeff Bezos. And so now this millionaire Donald Trump doesn't like this almost trillionaire Jeff Bezos. And because of that feud, well, what happens next? Well, because Amazon uses United States Postal Service, Trump is saying, well, they're using this service and they're abusing it and they're paying less than what you would have to pay. And because Postal Service, it does have low rates of delivering mail, because it should. That's the American service. It's subsidized by the federal government. And so because it's subsidized, Donald Trump is saying, well, bye, Father Fox. But because it's subsidized by the federal government, which is something that, like, any company, including mine, can go to the United States Postal Service and deliver a package for a small amount compared to UPS or FedEx, because it's partly subsidized by the government. Every package, like, part of the bills for the Postal Service are paid by the federal government, right? Because it's constitutionally given to all of us, right? And, well, see, Amazon took advantage of this, which they were legally able to do. Nothing said that they weren't able to do this. And Amazon's in the business of taking advantage of every advantage possible. And so, just keep in mind, they're the ones that get out of paying $0 in federal tax on $11 billion of net profits. So they're well aware, and they have a lot of lawyers that help them get out of tricky situations. There are a lot of people that work at Amazon to help them work within the loopholes of the American federal tax code and all these other things, you know? And thus they don't pay. And thus they don't pay as near as much in package delivery fees if they go to United States Postal Service, because it's somewhat subsidized by the federal government, right? So they took advantage of this. Nothing illegal about it, right? But Trump is saying, well, because Amazon is subsidized like this, we cannot support this. We cannot give billions of dollars if companies like Amazon are subsidized. Well, conveniently right now, the only thing really affected by not giving funding to the Postal Service is voting. Not Amazon, voting. And so Trump is trying to hide behind this whole Amazon feud of like, Amazon shouldn't be subsidized, and that's why we can't give $3.2 billion to the Postal Service to help them with voting stuff. Well, here's the thing, right? Funding is one issue. Funding is one thing. You can say all you want that, hey, I don't want to give funding to the Postal Service because it subsidized companies like Amazon that I don't like. Fine, you can say that all you want. You're entitled to say that. And a lot of people might agree with you that Amazon might need to pay more because they're such a rich company. You know? The second thing you said is that you're not funding Postal Service for vote by mail because it might come out where it's fraudulent votes being cast. Well, there's no evidence of that. So you can say it all you want, but there's no evidence, so you really can't push it, right? Trump is pushing it. But what you cannot do, and keep in mind, when he said on Fox News that he's going to defund the United States Postal Service, then he went on to National Public Radio, NPR, and said, "Oh no, I'm only not funding these certain specific things. People misunderstood me." Okay, maybe people misunderstood when you said, "I'm going to not fund the Postal Service for vote by mail." Maybe people misunderstood those direct words. I mean, how dare we quote you directly, you know? But what he did was he contradicted himself on 2 different media outlets. So, okay, fine, you contradicted yourself. It's not the first time Donald Trump has ever done that. But how come there's photographic evidence of you taking mail sorting machines out of key Democratic areas and not Republican areas? How come that's happening? Oh, that's right. It's voter suppression. You can hide behind Amazon all you want. You can hide behind that feud. You can hide behind all these other things of, oh, if we allow vote by mail, it's going to have horrible, horrible voter fraud, even though there's no evidence of that. You can hide behind all these things all you want. But if you're defunding the Postal Service from key Democratic areas and you're taking mail sorting machines out of key Democratic voting areas, that is called voter suppression. And it hurts your party just as much as it hurts your opponents when you do that. And it's also a federal crime that you should be jailed for. Now, until that comes to trial, until it goes through the whole process, it's going to be a long after the election, and Trump knows it at this point. We have to ask the question, how much are we willing to put up with from this man? It doesn't matter if he is Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter. Because now you have... why does Trump have to be such an ass? No one really knows. But it doesn't matter if... what party you're on here. If one candidate has to play by all the rules, and the other candidate, because he's president, gets to make up his own rules, gets to do voter suppression, gets to defund Postal Service, because he gets to make deals with Ukraine to help him win an election, because he gets to collude with Russia to win his election. Like, it shouldn't matter what party either of you are on. All of that stuff is illegal. And why it's illegal? Because if one candidate gets to do illegal things and not play by the rules, and the other candidate has to, that's not a fair election. And the American people deserve a fair election. That's why these rules were put in place by our founding fathers, right? So, I don't know. It's yet again a system where Donald Trump is literally rigging an election and getting away with federal crimes. The House will probably bring him up on charges, but the Senate won't take those charges because they're Republican controlled too. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, people. I don't know how November is going to work. All we can do is tell people register to vote and vote by mail. That's all we can do. It's really sad. But I wish there was better news in like the middle of the pandemic of like when was the last time he went a day without illegal activity? God, long time ago. Probably before he was president. I don't know. I mean, like, he's done so much illegal stuff at this point. I genuinely don't know. I mean, put it this way: if you have this many FBI investigations into you, probably not a good guy, right? If you have, if before you, without lying. God, never. I mean, that's the thing. Keep in mind, this is the same man that was saying, because of he was saying that because he didn't like Barack Obama, he was saying, prove that you were born in America, and then Obama was like, yeah, I was born in America, like, how do you think I became president? Because that's a rule in the Constitution that you have to be born in America. Like, how dumb of a thing is that? So he's trying. He tried to delegitimize Obama, and was completely racist in doing so. And then keep in mind, as soon as his campaign started for being president, as soon as it started, he started saying the words fake news over and over and over again. And here's the thing. If you do your research in the history of the world, ask yourself these questions. How did every dictatorship ever start? Does anyone out there know? Because dictatorship doesn't start with voter suppression, believe it or not. That's a result of it. In Russia and many other countries, there are elections technically. Like I think right now in Brazil there's an election going on, but it's being protested because voter suppression is happening, where basically either one candidate arrests the other candidate and puts them in jail so they can't really run, or they try to take the voters away from their opponent, which is voter suppression. That is what happens as a result of dictatorship. But how does dictatorship begin? Well, and so far you guys are hitting the nail on the head there. It's by controlling the media. It's by saying fake news. Do you want to know how Hitler came to power? Now, if you're not aware, which I don't know how you're not aware at this point, but Hitler was the head of the Nazi Party, and he was in charge of Nazi Germany, which killed millions upon millions of Jews. He something like 11 million people. Hold on. How many people died in Holocaust? It was 11 million people died in the Holocaust. Yeah, I was right. Okay, so Hitler was the man who sent Jews and anyone different, including LGBTQ people. If you weren't part of the Aryan race, which meant you were blonde hair, blue-eyed, you were sent to a concentration camp. And these concentration camps had certain people working in like slave labor camps and prison labor, and other people, a majority of the people were just sent to furnaces and they were killed, or gas chambers and they were killed, and so, it was one of the worst tragedies that ever happened in the history of the world, and how he started all of his rhetoric, how he started his whole campaign to do what he did and killing 11 million people, and would have killed millions more if we didn't stop him, if the allies of the world didn't stop him. He started it with the words, and literally, if you look up history, the words fake news were one of the first things Hitler said when he came to power. Because no matter what you do wrong, if any media outlet covers you doing that wrong thing, and you have the ability to call that fake news, and it basically discourages anyone from reporting on you, because no one's going to believe anything wrong was ever done by you, So it's this whole mindset of like, basically, if you can make any kind of bad news about you look like it's false, doesn't matter how you do it, if you can make that look like false news, or false coverage, or false facts, no one's going to believe you do a bad thing in your whole life, And who doesn't have any clue about Nazi Germany? Like, this is something... Are you saying that I don't have any clue about Nazi Germany? Because boy does his research, by the way. You know, that's one of the very few things that we were actually taught in school. We weren't taught about LGBTQ topics, but we were talking about the World War II. So, yeah, I don't understand Sean Coates' comment there. I don't know if he's talking to... What? Okay, whatever. But anyway, that's what we have to deal with. That's how Hitler came to power, is like fake news, you know? And we've seen this from dictators time and time again. Now, Hitler wasn't really a dictator. He was the leader of a movement. Yes, you're right, okay? Oh, God. What? What are you guys fighting about in the comments now? The Weimar Republic was Germany's government from 1919 to 1933, the period after World War I until the rise of Nazi Germany. It was named after the town of Weimar, where Germany's new government was formed by a national assembly after Kaiser Wilhelm abdicated. Okay. So that was what it was called, but I still don't understand your point. Anyway. Oh my God. Anyway, well, there's a lot that how the Nazis came to power, yes, but how Hitler became the head of the Nazi Party is partly because he called fake media. Like, when he became the head of the Nazi Party, right? He started saying fake news, and all this other stuff, right? Because it was this false narrative that other people were... Sorry, it's laggy. Let's get back to non-laggy, Matt. Lag. Sorry. Alright, should be somewhat better now? Yeah, sure. It's better. But why we're talking about Hitler is because... Okay, so, like, when he became the head of the Nazi Party, how do you stop people from reporting on you killing millions of people? How do you stop people from talking about all the bad things you've done in your life, you know? How does any dictator stop the media from talking about all the bad things you've done? Now, if you're in a country like China or something, you control all the media, right? Or Russia especially. You control the media. You have a news station of your own that's government controlled. So there's not this freedom of the press that we have in America where anyone can work for a news station if they want to, you know? But in Russia, you work for the government as the media. And so Vladimir Putin, who's the head of Russia, he controls what the Russian people hear from the government. He controls how every story is reported on. And just like North Korea, yeah, all of these dictatorships control the media of how the media covers any event. It doesn't matter if it's a big national news story or if it's a little tiny house fire or whatever that the media is covering. The government and the president or dictator controls how that is messaged to the public, right? And so all of a sudden in these dictatorships you have, well, Vladimir Putin is such a great guy. Look at all the great stuff he's doing. You don't ever hear the bad stuff he's doing because it's Russia television. Just like, oh, China. Oh, you don't really hear anything about the head of China being a bad person because it's all Chinese controlled. The media is Chinese controlled. They literally block a majority of the internet from their people because they don't want other countries' media outlets covering what they do in their own countries. You know, in China right now, there's people called quasars or something like that, who are being, put in camps like crazy and forced to work in prison labor conditions, and other media outlets are covering that around the world, but the Chinese people never hear about it because Chinese government blocks all those news stories from coming in through the internet. They literally block it. So but here's the thing, unless you can control the media in your own country because you're a dictatorship already, like China or Russia or North Korea, unless you already have that power, how do you control the media? How do you control what the American public hears in a country that has freedom of the press? How do you do it in Germany, where there was lots of media outlets before Nazis came to power? How do you control that? Well, you call any bad press fake news, fake press. And then you call any good press about you great. Like, you push that and you suppress the bad news. You suppress the bad media and you promote the good stories about yourself, right? That is what Hitler did. That is what a majority of dictatorships do. And that is what Donald Trump started his campaign doing. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is trying to become a dictator, but he started his whole campaign with fake news rhetoric of any bad press about me is fake, any good press about me is wonderful. That's how he started his whole rise to power. And now he's doing voter suppression. Second sign of a dictator. Oh, and also, yeah, it's fake news if it doesn't agree with me. Yeah, that's exactly what Trump is doing. But not only that, there is a majority of Trump supporters who legitimately support the idea that Trump will run for office here. If Trump wins this election in 2020, it will take him to 2024, if the world survives that long. But Trump will be president if he wins this election until 2024. What happens in 2024 then? Well, a lot of Republican voters want Ivanka Trump to run in 2024. And she, in theory, could be president until 2028, and then be reelected until 2032, right? So she, in theory, could be president until 2032. Then another of the one of the brothers runs for president. Donald Jr. runs for president in 2032. He could, in theory, be president until 2040. The other brother runs then and could be president until 2048. And then the youngest son, Barron Trump, who is right now a teenager, could run in 2038 or whatever it is. How to do the math? Hold on. So we have 2020 plus 4 for if Donald Trump actually wins, right? Plus 8 for Ivanka. This takes her to 2032. Plus 8 for Donald Trump Jr. takes him to 2040. Plus 8 for Eric Trump takes him to 2048, and then by that point, Barron Trump, who's a teenager now, will be 35 years old, and that makes him eligible to run as president in the United States, so he could be president until 2056. So even if you keep with all of the rules in American politics, that you have to be an American-born citizen and you have to be 35 years old in order to run for president, and you can only be a president for 8 years, 2 consecutive terms, or eight total years. That is what constitutionally you're allowed to do. It's an amendment to the Constitution that you cannot be president for more than 8 years, because otherwise it will create like a kingdom or a dictatorship, right? And that's what they were really, really, that's what they were really in fear of, right? And so even if you keep with all of the rules, Trump family could be president until 2056. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So, like, it's so fucked up. Like, what the potential here, right? You're like, yeah. I hope. Well, I said it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just a matter of like, Republican voters have said that's exactly what they want. Republican voters have come to Trump rallies and said, we want them to run back to back to back, and we'll have Trump presidencies until 2056. They've said that. It's not a conspiracy theory if a lot of Trump voters support that movement. And so it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, Sean, but you're wrong here. I haven't lost it. Republican voters have lost it. I'm, again, independent. I can give two shits what party you're on as long as you... as long as you support LGBTQ rights, I can care less. Trump doesn't. And so thus I don't support him. But yeah, and so in theory, on this issue, I support the Democratic nominee more than the Republican nominee. Wait, the amount of petitions towards saving Barron Trump from Donald is hilarious. Oh God, I didn't know that was a thing. That's funny. Okay. I mean, someone needs to save them. What happened to rationality? If there wasn't petitions for it, I wouldn't be talking about it. But yeah, that's what's happening in America nowadays. So, I mean, that's the thing. You have all of these warning signs of like, and I'm here's the thing, Sean, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying you have all of these warning signs of dictatorships. And legally speaking, you could have a dictatorship in America. You could, because it's all one family, like, you had him start off his whole campaign with fake news, which is what every dictator in the history of the world has done. You have him doing voter suppression, which is something that every dictatorship in the world has done. It's like you have all of these signs, and then how are you not... You have all these signs that, hey, Donald Trump is doing the same exact things every single dictator in the history of the world right now has done. And then you also have petitions from Republican voters trying to get all of his family members to run as president. And so what are you supposed to do besides connect all the dots? What are you supposed to do? Like, I know it might be construed as a conspiracy theory, but you start connecting dots and you're not too far off, And second, and like beyond all that, Trump is not a Republican either. Trump is legitimately not the Republican Party is here, the Democratic Party is here, and then there's Trump, which is completely separate, I don't know. It's like he's so far off from the message of that Republicans and Democrats have had for years. He's legitimately his own party at this point, you know? So anyway, I'm just saying there's dots to connect, Sean, you know? I'm not saying that I personally believe that's going to happen. I'm just saying it could happen. So anyway, moving on to like less crazy things that are happening. How are y'all doing tonight? It's been 2 hours and I've been talking about these 2 stories. It's great. Also, I love iced tea. I'm sure they love that promotion after after all the news stories I've talked about today. Are there any other candidates, and where can I find the info? Okay. So basically, if you live in America, you can go to. All right, I will show you how this works. All right. How do I hold on? Camera and display. Transition, right? So this is vote411.org. VOTE 411.org. If you go here, you can enter your street address. Now, I'm not going to click on this personally because it probably has my address saved. But if you enter your address, your city, your state, and your zip code here, where you live, let me see if I can get to the next page without my address actually showing up here. Yeah, it looks like it. So, all right. So if you enter your address, this is the next page that you come up. It shows you when the actual election is. And it shows you, like Tuesday, November 3rd is the election here in America this year. Mail-in and absentee ballot applications must be received by 5 p.m. on October 27th by your county election offices. Registration deadline is October 19th. So you have to be registered to vote by October 19th. You have to send in your absentee ballot applications by no later than 5 p.m. on October 27th. Typically, you want to get your actual votes in before then, too. Just because it's going to be slower to do mail-in voting this year because of how many there actually are. So then you can find out, where's it at? It also lets you know upcoming debates and forums for the candidates that are running in your area. So if there's any candidate running for office in your area that you'll be voting for in your election this year, it lets you know any debates or forums coming up for that actual election, right? So there's only one coming up for me. But if you live in a bigger area, you can probably see a lot here. Just to make sure my address doesn't get online. I'll come back to this page, and now we'll go back to this. Then you can get resources on how to actually vote by absentee ballot or mail-in voting there. And let's see. Find out what's on your ballot by exploring now. You can actually see what races are going to be or what questions are going to be on your ballot itself. So you click on that button, and the only reason I'm going back and forth between the screens here is to make sure my address doesn't, to make sure when I click on something, my address isn't actually listed, because I put my address in to actually find this page. So I don't want that getting out there online, and this is all live, so I need to transition back to my face cam and then see if my address is anywhere on the screen, and then we'll transition back to the computer screen here. But that's just out of pure safety concerns. But when you click on that button of find out what's on my ballot, this is what comes up. Any races that are going to be on your ballot or any questions that are going to be on your ballot show up here, right? So this is my ballot of Pennsylvania Attorney General. Okay, I can find out the description of that office. So Pennsylvania Attorney, let's go back here. View my races, right? Let's see, House District 9. This is a great one to go to, right? So description of office, representative in the U.S. Congress, right? So this is U.S. House District 9. Congress, the legislative branch of the federal government, is comprised of two houses. The upper house is the Senate. The lower house is the House of Representatives. A majority vote by both houses is necessary to pass a law. It lets you know what that position is. It lets you know how long of a term that office is held. So every 2 years, this is up for election. It lets you know the salary that person will make if they are voted in. So that's the yearly salary that they'll make, $174,000 per U.S. congressman, per U.S. House of Representatives person. That is insanely high, but considering it all used to be free. But then it lets you know who's going to be the candidates in that race. So Democrat Gary Wigman, you can see that he's a dentist, a farmer, a small business owner. Dan Muser, Republican, U.S. congressman because he won last time, and he's currently the congressman for this House District 9. You can know what their biography is, so what county they come from, mailing address, their education, their qualifications for that job, their campaign website. So if you want to know more about their campaign, you can go to each of their websites, their Facebook and their Twitter accounts, so they can see up-to-date things of how they feel about certain issues or what happened today in the news. How do they feel about it? You can find that information there. What are the top priorities? What would be your top priorities as a U.S. representative over the next 2 years? And they answer these questions of these are their goals. These are their goals, you know? So if you can read through this and you can go, well, what do I care about as a voter? What are the most important priorities to me as a person? Like, my opinion matters here. And so for me personally, I want to see LGBTQ positive votes. I want to make sure that they're going to be LGBTQ friendly. So I'm looking through these and I'm going, okay, well, I'm going to read through them and go, okay, these are important issues to you. These are important issues to you. If neither of them mention anything about LGBTQ education or legislation, I'm probably going to go to their campaign websites and see if there's any LGBTQ stuff on their websites that they can care about. You can find out what their policies are on certain things. How would you go about finding censuses and reducing gridlock in Washington? Oh, how would you go about finding consensus and reducing gridlock? They answer that question, you know? So you can literally go through your entire election and find out the, like, even Libertarian or Green Party or other candidates that are on that ballot in your races, you know? Let's say for, you know, here, there's 4 different candidates. You can find out not just the information on that office, but you can find out information on each of the candidates that you want. You know, this is how it goes for all the elections across the whole nation. Vote411.org. You can actually find out all this information, and it's all for free. Yeah, so it's pretty cool resources that I really encourage you to go to. Also, if you want to register to vote here in America and you're not already, unfortunately 1 in 5 LGBTQ people are not registered to vote in this year's election. We know that for a fact from Drag Out the Vote. And I'm sure they would really love me doing this after a whole bunch of news stories. But if you go to, let me see. If you go to dragoutthevote2020.org, which I'll put it in the comments here in a second, but you can go to their homepage, Drag Out the Vote, and you can hit this button right here, register to vote, and you can actually register to vote in the United States so that you can actually become a voter if you're above the age of 18 in America. So you can register to vote. You can find out more information. See, 1 in 5 LGBTQ adults is not registered to vote, which is absolutely horrible. And 100 million people did not vote in 2016 that are eligible to vote. That is insane. And like, if that many people voted, it would have. These are all of the partners of the Drag Out the Vote, but Pennsylvania Equality Project is the official exclusive partner here in Pennsylvania for Drag Out the Vote. You can also, if you're a drag performer yourself and you want to help get people registered to vote, you can become a part of the Drag Ambassador program by clicking there and apply to work with them and volunteer. So it's a really cool project that they do, and I absolutely love what they do. So I highly encourage you to go there, register to vote, and also go to vote411.org in order to actually find out who's going to be on your ballot this year. So I'll leave both those links in the comments right now. So if you're watching this on playback, you can go to if you're watching this playback, you can go to the live chat right now, and you can find both those links to dragoutthevote2020.org and vote411.org/ballot. Or if you just go to vote411.org, you can find out more information on what your ballot's going to be. I have a question. Sean, I just came to the question section. If you read the bio on one candidate and you loved it, but it didn't mention LGBT, but the other candidate did give lip service to LGBT, who would you vote for? Well, in my opinion, who I vote for is a personal decision. So in specific races, I'm not going to give you information of who I want to vote for, because I'm independent and I believe in the secrecy of who I vote for, personally. But let's say to one candidate, they make it a main talking point. Like, typically speaking, LGBT isn't going to be a top listed priority this year because of coronavirus. I would, even as an LGBTQ advocate myself, I would say that it shouldn't be the number one priority right now, this election cycle. It should be coronavirus. No question about it. Coronavirus is the number one issue facing our world right at this very moment, So if LGBTQ was their top priority, maybe you should concentrate on COVID-19 first, and keeping us all safe, like literally every person on earth, But if it's on their list on 411.org as a top priority, then maybe that's a great thing that I might want to vote for. It's a matter. I'm not going to tell you exactly who you should vote for. Now, in the president election, I can tell you definitely who I'm not voting for is Donald Trump, but there are other candidates besides Donald Trump and besides Joe Biden. There are other candidates too. I'm not going to say who I'm specifically voting for, but I'm not going to tell you. But in that specific race, I can tell you I'm definitely not voting for Donald Trump, and I highly suggest no one vote for him. But it's pretty much like anyone but Trump. That's who I endorse. It's weird because, like, if you look at the issues facing our country, as we said in the coronavirus episode, there are things that could have solved this whole issue of, like, if we had better healthcare, if we had better education, if we had better all this other stuff, like if we had a better president, like there are things that could have solved a lot of these issues. But anyway, so it's one of those. Congressional representative. Yeah, that's something where I Okay, so let me go back to this. The House District 9, right? Right here, right? Let me get to it. Here. All right. So on this, right? On this specific race, which is my congressional district, right? Gary Wegman, by the way, when you go down here, LGBTQ is not listed on either of these sides. So according to 411.org, which gets their information from the campaigns themselves, right? On neither of them, LGBTQ is a top priority, right? So you go, well, I mean, first off, COVID-19 should be a top priority of both of them. Yeah, you're right, but LGBTQ isn't listed on either of these. So, all right, fine. Well, is it listed on their websites? Either of their websites, do they care for LGBTQ issues on their websites? Is it a priority of theirs to keep equality and Black Lives Matter movement? Whatever you care about, make sure it's on that website of their campaign websites, make sure that they care about it too before you go and vote for them. I know a lot of times people will vote for someone because they personally know that person's name, or they've seen more advertising for that person or whatever. I personally feel like you should research these candidates before you go to the ballot box to know, what do I care about as a person? And do they reflect that, or do they oppose everything that I care about? I firmly believe you should do the research before you go to the ballot box. There's that responsibility there of making sure that they reflect your opinions, because if you don't make sure that they reflect your opinions and they end up going against your opinion, it's your own damn fault that you voted for them. It's your own damn fault that they got the popular vote in most of the races, in that case. So with these two, all right, well, neither of them list LGBTQ. So if you go to their websites, you can find that information out if they really do care about it. Now, I will tell you, in this specific race, because there's someone asking about it, Gary Wegman, who's the Democrat nominee, doesn't matter he's Democrat, doesn't matter he's a Republican, right? That doesn't matter to the issue at hand here, right? Gary Wegman had a booth set up at the Pride event in Pottsville that we broadcasted. If you remember, like back in June of this year, we broadcasted the Pottsville Pride in its entirety, and Gary Wegman had an entire booth at that event. He was there all day long, set up, answering questions. He was there talking about the Equality Act. When my organization did a presentation, and when I spoke at that event, Gary Wegman came over to me right after that speech was over, and he's like, hey, here's my business card. You and me need to talk sometime, because I care about the Equality Act. I care about these things that the community cares about, and I really want to help. So he told me, he's like, I know that the Pennsylvania Equality Project is a 501c3 organization, so the organization you work for can't endorse any candidates, but if you allow me the time, I would love to talk about this sometime. I would love to know what issues the LGBTQ community faces, and that way, if and when I get elected to this office, I can care for those issues too, because he's not personally LGBTQ. His campaign manager, by the way, is a gay man, but he goes, I would love to learn what issues you face. That way I can care for them in office, because I represent you as well, Now, that's what Gary Wegman told me in the election. He's like, I care about what you care about, and I want to have this conversation with organizations like yours who do the research, who know what problems you guys face, and that way I can reflect those problems and do something about them in office. Dan Muser over here, who is the incumbent into this election, the last time he was running for office, he was running against another Democrat back 2 years ago. And we were covering the entire election from beginning to end during that one, because it wasn't COVID-19. So we were covering all these different debates. We were covering all of this, right? And so at one of the debates, before one of the debates, we reached out to his campaign as an organization, all right? And I'll show you this, actually, because this is massively important, right? Let's see. Because we'll find it here. And I'm not even seeing any of your comments right now if you're commenting away. I literally, it's the same screen that I look at the comments on that I'm looking at this right now. So... Oh, it was last year. It was... No, it was 2 years ago, wasn't it? Do the candidates care about LGBTQ rights? Because we did a whole episode about it. Oh, playlist. Let's go to playlist. Let's go to season 1 of the show. All right. So there's this episode from November 1st, 2018, right before the November election 2 years ago. And we asked the question to every candidate in every race, locally and nationally. Do the candidates care about LGBTQ rights? We asked them the basic questions of, are you going to vote for the Equality Act? Do you care about these certain things that the LGBTQ community is facing right now and discrimination? Are you going to help us with these issues, right? We asked them the question, and in this episode, we covered all of their answers. The Democratic opponent to Dan Muser back then was another man who responded to us. And he's like, I care about LGBTQ issues, and here's what I'm going to vote for if I get elected into office, right? That's what his opponent back then used to say to us. Dan Muser never got back to us. So we went to a debate, and we actually covered the whole debate beginning to end. Let me get to it now. We actually covered a whole event. Matt, hold on. Matt Hudson projection. All right. So So we went to a local middle school near us where they were having a political debate between Dan Muser and, let's see, where is it at now? Denny Wolf. Denny Wolf got back to us and he told us, we're gonna vote for the Equality Act. We're gonna vote for these things, And so his campaign got back to me. We covered this on October 25th. We broadcasted it on October 26th, the day after. And it was the entire debate between the two, right? After that debate was over, we went behind the scenes and we asked both of the candidates to answer us on camera about LGBTQ rights, because none of lag. Sorry, it's getting laggy, guys. But that's Denny Wolf's response right there in the episode, right? And he also gave us a response on camera, right? And then, where is it at? Dan Muser also gave us a response on camera. Now, in the episode, I give you all the facts. I tell you, here's their official response, But I will tell you that Dan Muser didn't really specifically say he would vote for any certain legislation. He just says, I support LGBTQ rights. Because you're supposed to say that as a candidate, Republican or Democrat. Whereas the Democratic challenger to him back in 2018 said, I'm going to vote for the Equality Act. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, like specific things, right? So this election, we know that Dan Muser kind of supports LGBTQ, but he kind of only has to, right? Whereas Gary Wegman is actually showing up to Pride events. Gary Wegman is actually doing and walking the walk, right? He has a campaign manager that is he has a campaign manager that is gay himself. And so he massively supports the LGBTQ community, and he's, since that Pride event in June, he's been attending as many LGBTQ Pride events as he can in the area, including an LGBTQ summit that just happened yesterday online. So it's insane. It's like, well, the one candidate massively supports the LGBTQ community, and the other one just says, hey, I'll support the community, but not specifically certain things, you know? So it's like, if you're asking me who I'm going to vote for in that specific race, at this point in the show, it probably is pretty clear of who I'm going to personally vote for. But it's not enough for candidates to believe you are equal from the depth of his heart. I mean, it is enough if he believes that, but if you truly believe that, wouldn't you say to the American public you're going to vote for specific things? Because I asked him, I'm like, so here's the thing: go watch that LGBT. Go watch that episode of, you know, do the candidates care about LGBTQ rights, and make your own decision. That's the way I personally feel, but that doesn't matter to you. Like, it shouldn't have to matter to you how I personally feel. Like, I provide all the facts to you as a broadcaster, and then at the end, because even in that episode, in the very beginning of that episode, I said to people, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read off, quote, word for word, what the candidates' responses were from every race. I'm going to read you their specific quotes. I'm going to provide all the facts to you. I'm going to give you their entire answer to me in that press briefing room, uninterrupted. Their complete answer from beginning to end. No cuts, no edits, no nothing. I'm going to give you all the info. And I told you in the very beginning of that episode that I'm going to provide all those facts, and then at the end of that episode, there's going to be a minute or two of me going over my personal feelings, how I personally feel about those facts. You don't have to agree with those facts. You don't have to agree with my opinion of those facts, but here are the facts for you. If you don't want to hear my opinion and you want to form your own opinion, then you're more than welcome to just listen to the facts themselves and then go about making your own informed opinion about those facts. Great. I don't mind. I really don't mind. But if you want to hear my opinion, you're more than welcome to... Are feelings more important than facts? Facts are how you form an opinion, but I feel like it's... here's the thing, like, if we're talking about... Okay, for example's sake here, right? Let's say we're talking about the coronavirus, right? Which is the most common issue right now in the election, or anything, you know? So we know for a fact that 157,000 Americans died from coronavirus. We know that for a fact. We know that, you know, what is it, 16 point something million people have been infected worldwide. We know that a certain percentage die from it. We know that America is one of the hardest hit from it. We know all these facts, right? Because that's all data. You cannot fake data. You can't, I mean, you can, but it's easily proven that it's faked. So, I mean, with the coronavirus, it's not fake data. It's like, data is data. It's always going to be the same. No matter how you count things, no matter how you do things, it's always, facts are facts. It's like scientific, what is it called? Scientific facts are here's the constant. No matter how many times you study this certain thing, it's always going to come back to the same answer, right? So, scientific rules. I'm sorry, yeah. And scientific rules are things that have been studied multiple times, and no matter what, the answer is always the same, right? So it's a constant. You're not going to change that statistic. You're not going to change the facts, right? But so we know that 157,000 people died from the coronavirus in America so far, right? Actually, that might have been updated now to a higher number, unfortunately. How many people died from COVID-19? Yeah, let's go with that. Show all. 169,000 people have died from the coronavirus in the United States, right? So we know that as a fact, right? Now, what's important about facts is that facts are just numbers or sentences on paper, right? That's all a fact is. It doesn't change anything, right? Like that 169,000 people that died, it's not going to stop the next person from dying. It's not going to, make anything better or worse. It's a fact. It's 169,000 people died from coronavirus. Great. Like that's a fact, and it's tragic, right? But that alone is not going to stop the next person from dying from a coronavirus, right? What those facts do is form opinions, right? And so in the case of coronavirus, it forms the opinion, we need to prevent the next death. We need to do everything in our power to prevent the next person from dying, and that way we don't hit 170,000, right? And so it forms that opinion. And hopefully everyone's on the same page of we need to prevent the next death. Hopefully everyone's on the same page of we need to stop this from happening in the future. And so facts inherently form opinions. And in some cases like the coronavirus, hopefully we're all on the same page about that and have the same opinion of those facts. But facts aren't going to change no matter what opinion you have. No matter if you're Donald Trump saying, coronavirus isn't real and, you're perfectly safe. It's not going to change the fact that 169,000 people died from coronavirus. His opinion doesn't change the fact that 169,000 people died from coronavirus. It doesn't change that fact, because that fact is always going to be a constant. Now, in the case of LGBTQ issues, we know the facts. We know the facts that, 40% of LGBTQ Americans try to... Trump is an idiot. That is low-hanging fruit. Give me more. What do you mean give you more? Anyway, so we know that LGBTQ people, 40% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered suicide last year. We know that for a fact. Nothing's going to change that because it already happened. Nothing's going to, no matter how much evidence you come out with, no matter how many studies of that evidence you do, it's always going to come up to that same number of 40%, right? You can study that, the stats and data from that all you want. You're always going to come up with the same number, right? And you're always going to come up with, more than 50% of transgender youth seriously consider suicide. Right? And why do so many LGBTQ youth consider suicide? That's an issue we are covering on the show, but it's also one that we're going to do a specific episode about. But those kind of things take time, and they take interaction with the Trevor Project and groups like it. So we're working on it. But we sort of covered depression and why that happens in our episode Grindr and Gay Loneliness. Oh no, Gay Loneliness and the Grindr hookup culture episode of ours. We kind of cover a little bit of that, of why so many LGBTQ people are depressed as children, and we cover depression on another episode of It's Time I Tell You About My Depression, I think it's called. So we do cover it a little bit on the show, but we'll probably do an episode all about it soon-ish. Anyway, so we know that those are the constants. Those are the facts. Now, how do you feel about those facts? What we can do as a show is provide you with the facts that 40% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered suicide last year. What you feel about those facts is important. And what candidates feel about those facts is important. Because if you're of the proper mindset that you're human and you care about other people's lives, then you're going to feel like, okay, we need to prevent that number from rising, especially if at all possible, we need to lower that number for 2020, right? So we need to prevent the next person from committing suicide. And so if you're an elected official, you should be saying to your constituents, wow, that's a crazy high number. We need to control that. We need to do everything in our power to bring that down so that kids don't feel the need to commit suicide, right? And so that's where the feeling about facts comes in. And so facts are inherently important, but how you feel about those facts is just as important. Because you can look at those facts and go, I just don't care that 40% of LGBTQ people are wanting to commit suicide. You can legitimately say that, and that's your opinion. But if you're an elected official saying that I don't care about kids committing suicide, should we not be extremely concerned over that narrative, right? And so, look, I'm not saying if you don't show up to a Pride event, it doesn't mean you're not an LGBTQ supporter, right? It doesn't mean you're homophobic or transphobic if you don't show up to an event, right? But if you have one candidate who's showing up to every LGBTQ event he possibly can, he or she can, right? And if you have the other saying it, I care, but only when I have a camera in my freaking face, ask me the question, and I know it's recording. You know, here, we reached out to both their campaigns about a month before that debate we were talking about a moment ago, and they had a month to respond. We actually reached out to both their campaigns multiple times, and the Denny guy gave us a response the first time we asked. Dan Muser never gave us a response. He just didn't care to give us a response. It wasn't until he had a camera in his face recording that he gave us a response of, oh, yeah, I care, you know? Because he knew if he said anything other than that while he's on camera being recorded, it's gonna make major press, you know? So it's like, you can kind of tell how LGBTQ friendly someone is if they have it on their website that they care about LGBTQ issues, and you don't have to ask them about it. If you never have to reach out to a candidate to ask them, are you LGBTQ friendly? Because you already see it on their campaign website, typically speaking, it's something they care about greatly, right? But if you have to reach out to them multiple times and they only answer you when they have a camera in their face recording, is that answer legitimate, or is it just, I had to answer that way or else I'm in major fucking trouble, you know? So that's how I personally felt about the facts back 2 years ago. This year, I go, well, you have one candidate at Pride events and wanting to be a part of the community, asking LGBTQ activists, what problems do you face? Sit down and talk with me. Gary Wegman, in his campaign, said, specifically reached out to me and he's like, hey, by the way, if I win, one of the first things I want to do is sit down with you and your entire team, and I want to learn what issues you face. I want, if you can, send me the statistics, the reports that you've come out with over the years on studies you've done in Pennsylvania here. Tell me what problems you face so that I can have the evidence behind me to write legislation to help you. Tell me what you face, and that way I can help you. You know? Because no matter who the candidate is, right? Like, for instance, if it's if it's a man running, they're not going to know about feminist issues near as much as they're going to know about men issues. You know, so many things, like, no matter what you care about, no matter what you personally care about, there's no candidate out there that's going to care about every single issue, right? There's no candidate out there that's going to know enough about every issue to care about them. But a good candidate, no matter their party, will be able to go, you know what, I don't know about this enough personally in order to write legislation to help you. So sit down with me, talk to me about it, send me what you have, show me what the problem is, and that way I can fix it for you. You know, that's what a good candidate is going to do, regardless of party. And I've been very lucky enough in my activism and my career here, as a YouTuber on this, to have both Democratic and Republicans who reach out to us and say, sit down with me, tell me what problems you face. We've had people on both parties, Republican and Democrat, say that to us, of like, sit down with me, tell me the problems you face so that I can help you, so that I can help you best. And that's what makes a good candidate. Doesn't matter your party, doesn't matter you know, who's funding your campaign. It's legitimately just, it's a way to figure out who cares about what, you know? What? Maybe I just believe that all people should be left to their own beliefs. If you want to be gay, fill your boots, I don't care. If you want to be gay, no one can choose to be gay. That's worded weird. Because it's not a choice to be gay. To me, you're just another person who deserves the same respect I afford to everyone else. Do I owe a special consideration to you that I don't owe other people? What? Like, well, I mean, like, I know I'm just another person to any of you, but I'm a news reporter, so I get to ask the questions that a lot of people don't have the same access to ask. So, I mean, as part of the media, I have a responsibility to let you know all the facts, and that's exactly what I do. Like I said in that episode, here are the facts. If you want to stick around to watch my opinion about that, great. If you don't, I don't care. Like, you can form your own opinion. For my job is to give you the facts. So, and that's what I'm doing this episode too, is like, well, let's talk about Hinnant. Let's talk about U.S. voter suppression. Let's talk about these facts. And then it's up to you to figure out what you feel about them, you know? Like, if you don't feel like voter suppression is a bad thing, that's your opinion. You're entitled to. I can give two shits, right? But as a news reporter, it's my job to cover that and be like, yeah, voter suppression is happening in America, you know? Now, if you don't care about it, okay. I did my job. And you did yours to form your opinion. If we talk about Hinnant, even in my reporting of that earlier in this stream, it's like, you can contact CNN, NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox. You can contact all these networks and say, you know what? As a viewer, I care about Hinnant being covered, so please cover it. And they're probably not going to do it for one person, but if enough people contact them saying, we want this covered, then they'll probably care about it, you know? And they'll probably say, yeah, sure, we'll cover it because enough of our viewers care about it. But no matter the organization, no matter how big or small, they don't know about things without news tips, right? So, and that's how you feel. Hinnant should have been covered, but it was covered. That's the whole thing. Hinnant was covered by the local media in North Carolina, where it should have been covered because that's regional news. It wasn't covered at CNN or Fox or NBC or CBS or ABC because it wasn't national news. So that was the whole, like, debate, but also, like, that was my point in the beginning of the whole episode here, is like, it wasn't national news to cover it. So national news didn't cover it. Now, if someone wants to make a national story out of something that's not a national story, call in, ask CNN to make it a national story. Call in, ask Fox News to make it. And you say CNN has a narrative. Fox News has a narrative, and they didn't cover it either. Fox News has a Republican narrative. If you tune into Fox News, expect a Republican rhetoric. Expect a Republican turn on everything. If you tune in to NBC, expect a Democratic turn to everything, right? But the truth is, you can blame all mass media all you want. Neither of them covered Ken and Hinnant. Neither of them covered this story because it wasn't national news. It was a regional story. And so the regional news did their job. The regional press did their job, right? They did as much as they could. And national news did their job too. They covered the national story of Black Lives Matter. You know, because that's the national story right now, and coronavirus and everything else they have to cover, you know? So everyone's doing their job. It's just like everyone's trying to blame the other person of, how come you didn't cover this? How come you didn't? Like, well, it's not our job to cover regional stories, you know? Just like for our show is here to cover national stories too, because we're a national agency, you know? It's our job to cover LGBTQ issues on a worldwide scale. If a house fire happens, now, personally, here's the thing. If a house fire happens where I live, I'm going to cover it because as a part of MHPTV, which is the broadcaster for this show, I'm also going to have, you know, the other channel of this network is MHPTV Local, which covers local stories like that. So I'm going to cover it for MHPTV Local channel, but I won't cover it for PBR channel because PBR is an international show. It doesn't handle little tiny stories like that, you know? Whereas MHPTV Local handles little stories like that, but we don't cover national news like that, you know? And so it's like we will cover small stories, but not on certain channels, you know? We'll cover certain stories, but on different channels than what you're watching now. So we cover pretty much everything that happens. It's just a matter of like, well, we're going to cover it on different platforms because we made those different channels for specific reasons. So anyway, it would have been covered because that's the local media like job to cover a story like that. It was a 5-year-old who got shot in the head. Like, how is any local media outlet not going to cover that story? No matter who killed who, no matter what color of skin either of them were, the local media and press had a responsibility to cover that story, and they did it. They covered it. If the local media didn't cover that story, you would have never heard about it. So they did their job. And it's horrible to hear people go, well, to use a 5-year-old's murder for their own political agenda. And that's what people have done with this story, is like they've tried to distract the Black Lives Matter movement with this one 5-year-old's death. It's like, yeah, both can be tragic simultaneously. Both can be just as bad. But one is a regional story and the other one is a national story. So the regional news covers Hinnant, the national news covers Black Lives Matter, because that's what they're supposed to do, you know? And if you want the full explanation of that, we have a whole explanation on our channel already about that. I mean, so, well, there are channels that lean Democratic just as much as Fox leans Republican. Maybe NBC is tiny bit more, well, MSNBC. I'm sorry. Yeah, MSNBC has a very Democratic tilt. Sorry, I should have made that clear. But NBC owns MSNBC, so. But anyway, like, I just, I don't get America anymore. I just don't. I was raised with Fox being the only unbiased channel. Wow, I actually, oh, is that what your parents taught you? Because it is very biased. It is so biased. Well, I mean, here's the thing. We can have and here's my point, Sean. We can debate all we want over media outlets should not have a spin to their stories. Now, on this channel, I make it very clear we are LGBTQ friendly all the way. So we're going to have a bias towards, yes, if something LGBTQ positive happens, we're going to cover it, and it's going to make that person or organization or thing look terrific because they were LGBTQ friendly. If we talk about Donald Trump passing his 170th anti-LGBTQ policy since taking office, Trump isn't going to come out of that story looking good. And we cover Trump all the time on this show. We covered Trump's 170 anti-LGBTQ policies that he's passed, you know? So when we cover something, it's going to have that LGBTQ slant on it of like, yeah, we're LGBTQ friendly show. We make no secret of that, you know? But at the same time, we can debate and what, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind MHP TV that runs this show. We also have another channel called MHP TV Local that doesn't have a slant at all. It's just, here are the facts, you know? We don't, I mean, of course, I'm LGBTQ, so I always want to cover more LGBTQ news stories than anything else. But if I'm covering a house fire, it's just going to be, here's what happened. Here's the house fire, you know? But we can debate all we want over national media outlets. They should be unbiased. They should provide, here are the facts, and you figure out how you feel about those facts, right? We can all agree that media outlets should do that nationally, but they don't. So if you really want sort of to form your own opinion about things, you kind of have to watch a story covered by Fox and covered by NBC. Or, sorry, better yet, watch Fox and watch CNN. Right? And that way you get both sides. Watch Fox, watch MSNBC, which is very far-leaning left, and then watch another outlet that you consider more moderate, right? Watch 3 networks cover the same exact story, and maybe you can form your own opinion of all of those facts, right? Unfortunately, that's what we have to do nowadays. But I wish there was some outlet that just provided, here are all the facts, and here's no opinion about it, you know? I wish that happened, but sadly nowadays we have a 24/7 news cycle where every network has to fill that time somehow. So they have to offer opinions, or else they're going to run out of facts of a story very quickly, you know? Because the facts of a story, for even a major story, you know, we talk about things that happened years ago where we have all the facts at this point. You can cover a news story like that in 5 to 10 minutes, you know? It's not 24/7. But in order to fill 24/7 stuff, you have to provide some sort of commentary, some sort of opinion pieces in there. And that by itself is sad. Years ago, it used to be, it was like a 1 hour or half an hour news show every night. And it's like, nowadays it's 24/7 news all the time. And it's like, you have to fill that time. And people are sponsored to fill that time. So they try to fill it. So anyway, thank you. You deserve way more support than you have. I try. Well, here's what really, it upset me this past weekend, honestly, is like we worked an entire week on that artist show for the special guest that was on the show, and I legitimately worked on that edit for like 3 or 4 solid days here at the office, and it's about 1,000 views at this point. And the bloopers, which I worked extremely hard on too, that has, only a couple hundred views. And I'm like really, really depressed about it because I really tried hard to make that good, But anyway, that's how I've been feeling. And then people are like, it's a really, really good episode. And I'm like, thank you, So I really needed it this week. I needed to feel some goodness from everything that happened. Anyway, I'm looking up Ivy's thing right now. Where did I put it? No, hold on. I know I have it. Because this was too cute not to show on screen. This is Ivy's Animal Crossing. I love the t-shirt because it's like perfect. And even got a face mask, which by the way, we have official PBR face masks now. So you can go to our store using the link in the description and get yourself a PBR face mask. It's really cool. Yeah. I love it. I love it, Ivy. I think you actually want good things. I just think you are going about it in a... Okay. It is adorable, right? Ivy, we just love you so much. That's what I get every stream. It's just like everyone loves Ivy. And do y'all want the pattern? Wait, you can legitimately save the pattern and give it to everyone so that they can play it in Animal Crossing? Is that a thing? Can you give everyone else like the pattern of the t-shirt so they can wear it too in the same game? I didn't know that. That's awesome. Anyway. So, also if you see pizza boxes behind me at a party the other night. My friend Chris was over and we were recording some stuff, and him and I decided to have a pizza party. So that's why it kind of looks messy in the office tonight. But anyway, yeah, customs are just pixel art. Oh, I know you can do it in Minecraft where you can save a shirt and then give it to everybody else, but anyway, now that we talked about Canon, Hinnant, and voter suppression in the United States, it's kind of the two topics of the stream. What else has been happening in national news? I really want to do an LGBTQ news show soon. And just like cover all the news stories that happened. But those are really, really hard to do. Oh my god. Anyway. I don't understand the world. You can email me anything you want, Ivy. I actually am a simmer and play Sims 4 player. Ah, cool. Anyway, so we also have fan art from JJ. This was the other fan art that was sent in just tonight. Love is love. Water is life. Black lives matter. Climate change is real. No human being is illegal. Religious diversity... no human being is illegal, besides pedophiles. Religious diversity is valuable. All genders are whole, holy, and good. Women have agency over their bodies. Yeah. I love it. I love that, like, art. It's like art over a picture or something. It's really cool. I see that all the time on Twitter. Yeah, it's pretty much chaos and news lately. You're right about that. But it was like, hey, here are two weird stories that are happening right now. And they're so big that we cannot not talk about them, you know? And it's like, oh, wow. This is artwork based on the art episode that we just did. Someone painted that after seeing our episode, a tutorial of how to paint pride flags in your paintings and hide them. That's awesome. Because there's a bisexual flag here, rainbow up here. Oh, man, that's awesome. What else do we got? That was it, I think. No? Was that it? Did I show that already? I think I showed that already. Yeah, I think I should. Alright. So, yeah. It's a lot. I love the chat. Fuck, that's good. Yep. You guys have good fan art. So keep sending it to me. And the more puppies, the better. Apparently. Have you seen gay painters' art? They're really good. I have seen that in, I believe, the Discord they're on. It's either Discord or Google, but it's really good. Cool. I should get it in a minute then. My internet is like super slow because I'm streaming outward, and that takes precedence over downloading stuff. So anyway, if you missed the story so far, oh, okay, there we go. If you missed the story so far, go back and watch them from the very, very beginning. In the first, like, pretty much 45 minutes to an hour. Oh, God. So, and then pretty much 45 minutes to an hour of this show, we covered the canon Hinnant story, and in the pretty much like second hour, we covered U.S. voter suppression. I'll probably break them up in the special YouTube stuff later, where you can click on a certain topic and go to that directly to that time code. But as for now, that was today's stream. Oh, cool. So yeah, that was today's stream. This is Ivy's, by the way. Hold on. This is Ivy's pattern that they used in Animal Crossing. So that's really cool. So if you want to copy that into your Animal Crossing or your Minecraft or something, you can. But yeah, as for today, that's it for our stream. Thank you so much for watching. Yet, Ivy, you're not wrong. Too long didn't read version is fuck Trump. He is shit. That is pretty much a good summary, not just of this stream, but of the entirety of his presidency. You're not wrong. I love that. What a perfect way to end it. Anyway, so thank you all for joining, and What? You ask weird questions, Sean. What do you think of black voters not supporting Pete? Voters are allowed to not support a certain candidate if they don't want to. I genuinely don't understand LGBTQ people not supporting Pete Buttigieg because he was gay himself and he was a wonderful candidate who I personally feel should have at least been more in the running. But see, here's the thing. I also believe that all the primaries in the country should happen on the same day and not certain states first, because by the time they get to Pennsylvania or a state like us, it's like, well, certain candidates are already dropping out because they can't win at that point or whatever, right? It's like they should all run at the same time and have the same election on the same day, and that way all the states get to decide who they want to be the primary candidate. So it's like, I don't understand this whole system of why certain primaries are before others and why certain primaries are wait, can we zoom after? Maybe. I could probably zoom after if you want, if you're up for it. Most gifted. So I don't know why certain people didn't support him, but yeah. But no, I don't know why states don't do it all on the same day, because then it's not really fair. And the Electoral College is very fucked up too, so that's another thing. It should be popular vote, like every other election is, you know? Because the Electoral College is like, well, we can control who our voters are. No, you shouldn't be able to pick your voters. Your voters should be able to pick you, you know? So I'll tell you what, Ivy, I will come on a stream for a little bit. Just give me a minute until I can hit the men's room, and then I will be on. All right. Post a link in the Google Classroom, and I will join in a couple minutes. All right. Anyway, it has been so much fun, and let's all hope and pray that Trump doesn't win, and pray that this voter suppression stops. And he's actually charged with that crime because it's a federal crime. So anyway, have a good night, everyone. And I will see you all later. And I'll see some of you on a Zoom call in a few minutes. Bye. Watch Powered by Rainbows Season 3 only on MHP TV.